Your first breath might be your last, and that's if you're lucky enough to take one at all. Before we go in, drop a comment with what time you're reading this. Might as well timestamp your descent into historical despair. Hit like and subscribe because we're about to tour 23 times and places where being born was essentially God's way of saying, let's see how creative we can get with suffering. Very creative. Part 1. Cambodia under the Khmer Rouge, 1975 to 1979. You're born in Cambodia in 1975, which is like winning the lottery if the prize was a lifetime supply of misery with a side of existential dread. The Khmer Rouge has just taken over, and their brilliant plan involves dragging everyone back to year zero. Not metaphorically, literally year zero. They've decided calendars are bourgeois, which explains why they're also convinced that glasses make you an intellectual enemy of the state. Wearing spectacles apparently equals plotting world domination. Who knew optometry was so threatening? Your first struggle isn't political, it's meteorological. Cambodia sits right in the tropical sweet spot where the humidity makes everything stick to everything else. Your clothes become a second skin within minutes, and that second skin feels like it's been marinated in despair. The monsoons arrive like clockwork, turning your forced labor camp into a swamp where you can't tell if you're drowning in rainwater or your own sweat. The rice fields stretch endlessly because Cambodia is basically one giant floodplain with delusions of grandeur. You learn that flat terrain means there's nowhere to hide and nowhere to run. The mountains are too far away and the forests are full of things that want to kill you. Snakes, tigers, and Khmer Rouge soldiers who've gone a bit feral. Your daily schedule is delightfully simple. Wake up at 4 a.m. to revolutionary songs played through speakers that sound like they're powered by dying hamsters. Work 14 hours planting rice in water that reaches your knees and contains more diseases than a medieval plague ship. The water buffalo look at you with what can only be described as pity, which is concerning when you're being judged by livestock. Food becomes a philosophical concept rather than a physical reality. Breakfast is rice soup so thin you can read through it. And assuming you're allowed to read, which you're not because literacy is suspicious. The rice grains floating in your bowl are like tiny life rafts in an ocean of disappointment. You start counting them because mathematics, thankfully, hasn't been declared counter-revolutionary yet. The tropical heat means food spoils faster than revolutionary enthusiasm, which is saying something. Your rice ration develops interesting new colors and textures that definitely weren't in the original recipe. You discover that hunger makes everything edible, including things that were questionably edible to begin with. The Khmer Rouge has thoughtfully eliminated money, private property, and the concept of personal space. Everyone sleeps in communal barracks that smell like a combination of unwashed socks and broken dreams. The bamboo walls are thin enough that you can hear your neighbor's stomach growling, which creates a symphony of starvation that lulls you to sleep. Children become tiny informants faster than you can say political education. Your playmates might report you for catching a fish without permission, which is apparently theft from the state, or for not catching enough fish, which is apparently laziness. The local rivers are full of fish, but touching them without proper revolutionary authorization is punishable by re-education, which sounds educational but involves considerably more dying. The weather creates its own special brand of torture. Dry season means dust that gets into everything, your food, your lungs, your revolutionary spirit. Wet season means everything turns into mud soup, including the paths between barracks, the work areas, and your will to live. The temperature never drops below uncomfortably warm, which means you're constantly dehydrated and constantly sweating out what little nutrition you've managed to consume. You learn that Cambodia's geographic position means it's surrounded by countries that might help if those countries weren't dealing with their own political disasters. To the east is Vietnam, which is busy with its own war. To the west is Thailand, which has closed its borders tighter than your stomach after 3 months of rice water. To the north is Laos, which is having its own communist experiment and isn't taking visitors. Medical care involves herbs selected by people whose qualifications include being alive and revolutionary. The tropical diseases queue up like they're taking numbers at a butcher shop: malaria, dengue fever, dysentery, and several conditions that don't have names but definitely have symptoms you'd rather not experience. The insects deserve special mention. Mosquitoes that seem personally offended by your existence. Lichens that attach themselves with the determination of political commissars. Flies that treat your food bowl like their personal bathroom, which wouldn't matter if you had enough food to be picky about it. Your education consists of learning agricultural techniques that would have been considered primitive in the Bronze Age. You're taught to plant rice using methods that ignore several thousand years of farming innovation because modern techniques are apparently capitalist propaganda. The irrigation systems you're forced to build by hand would make Roman engineers weep with laughter if Romans were still around and had a sense of humor about infrastructure disasters. Sleep becomes a negotiation between your body's need for rest and the bamboo sleeping mat's commitment to being as comfortable as a pile of resentment. The tropical nights are filled with sounds, crying from the prison buildings, the splash of bodies being dumped in the river, and the constant buzz of insects celebrating their good fortune at finding so many malnourished humans to feed on. You realize that being born here means you're living through humanity's most ambitious attempt to restart civilization using only paranoia, rice, and really bad agricultural planning. The experiment is not going well, but you're here for the duration whether you volunteered or not. But morning breaks over another day in paradise, and somewhere across the world, a different kind of hell is preparing to teach you that suffering comes in many flavors, and geography determines which ones you get to taste. Part 2, Germany during World War II, 1939 to 1945. The tropical heat fades into the bone-chilling cold of a German winter, where the snow doesn't just fall, but plots against you personally. You're born in Germany in 1941, which means you've arrived just in time for the grand finale of human civilization's most expensive tantrum. The country that gave the world classical music and precision engineering has decided to pivot into genocide and world domination, because apparently that seemed like a logical career change. Nobody mentions that German winters are colder than a banker's heart, and apparently the Reich forgot to budget for heating fuel. German winters are colder than a banker's heart, and the coal shortage means your family has to choose between heating the house and eating food that isn't frozen solid. You discover that being warm and being fed are mutually exclusive luxuries, like having both working plumbing and political freedom. The geography of Germany means you're surrounded by countries that are either trying to kill you or have already been conquered by people trying to kill them. To the west are the British, who've taken up nighttime bombing as a hobby. To the east are the Soviets, who are approaching with the enthusiasm of people who have a few grudges to settle. The Alps to the south would be lovely for skiing, if skiing involved fleeing for your life. Air raid sirens become your lullabies. The sound means you get to sprint to the basement and spend several hours in a concrete box with 30 neighbors who haven't bathed recently. The basement smells like fear, unwashed socks, and that special aroma of people who've been eating nothing but turnips and ersatz coffee for 3 years. Food rationing turns every meal into a mathematical equation. Your mother becomes a wizard at making one potato feed 4 people, which involves skills that would impress professional magicians. Butter becomes a mythical substance, like unicorns or honest politicians. Meat exists only in propaganda posters and increasingly distant memories. The Hitler Youth Program ensures your education covers important subjects like marching, saluting, and identifying enemies of the state by the shape of their noses. Regular subjects like mathematics and literature are still taught, but with fascinating new twists. Your math problems involve calculating bomb loads, and your literature consists entirely of books about how wonderful everything is, written by people who are definitely not being held at gunpoint. Your neighborhood changes daily due to the British commitment to urban redevelopment through high explosives. Streets disappear overnight, along with the families who lived on them. You develop an impressive ability to navigate by rubble landmarks, to send left at the crater that used to be the bakery, straight past where the school was, mind the unexploded bomb near what's left of the church. The German efficiency that built the Autobahn network gets redirected into organizing the most systematic murder program in human history. Trains run on time, but their destinations have names like Auschwitz and Treblinka. The same bureaucratic precision that makes German engineering famous gets applied to genocide, because apparently evil can be just as efficient as good. Winter means everything freezes, the water pipes, the food supplies, your hope for survival, and occasionally your neighbors. The German forests that inspired fairy tales become hiding places for people trying to avoid being turned into fairy tale villains' victims. The trees are beautiful when covered in snow, but they're also excellent for hanging people who ask too many questions about where their Jewish neighbors went. Your daily routine involves standing in queues that stretch around city blocks for the privilege of buying turnips with ration cards. The turnips taste like disappointment mixed with sawdust, but they're the only vegetables available that don't require a black market connection or selling your grandmother's wedding ring. The bombing schedule becomes as predictable as mealtimes, except more frequent and significantly more explosive. The RAF prefers nighttime visits, while the Americans favor daylight raids. You learn to tell the difference by sound. British bombers have a different engine note than American ones. Knowledge that's useful until both types drop bombs on your general vicinity. School happens in basements, abandoned buildings, and sometimes just doesn't happen at all because the teachers have been conscripted, evacuated, or turned into small pieces by enemy action. Your textbooks are increasingly creative with their version of current events, describing glorious victories that sound suspiciously like everyone you know being dead or missing. The German railroad system, once the pride of European transportation, becomes a conveyor belt of human misery. Trains carry soldiers to the front, refugees from the bombing, Jews to concentration camps, and occasionally actual passengers who just want to visit their relatives and pretend the world hasn't gone completely mad. Medical care involves doctors who've had most of their supplies requisitioned for the war effort. Aspirin becomes a luxury item. Antibiotics are reserved for soldiers, and surgical procedures are performed with equipment that's been sterilized through prayer and wishful thinking. The hospitals that aren't bombed are filled with casualties from the hospitals that were bombed. Your clothing is made from synthetic materials that were invented by chemists who clearly had a sense of humor. The ersatz wool makes you itch in places you didn't know could itch, and your shoes are constructed from materials that were never intended to be worn by human feet. Fashion becomes purely functional. If it keeps you warm and doesn't fall apart immediately, it's haute couture. The propaganda posters promise victory, while the reality delivers increasingly creative forms of defeat. Your diet consists of whatever can be grown in window boxes, foraged from bombed buildings, or created through chemistry experiments that would make professional chemists weep. Coffee is made from acorns, chocolate is made from sawdust, and hope is made from increasingly thin air. You discover that being German doesn't protect you from German efficiency, and that efficiency is turned toward killing people. The same organizational skills that make German businesses successful make German concentration camps horrifyingly effective. Your neighbors disappear with clockwork regularity, and asking about them becomes inadvisable for your continued existence. The approaching end of the war brings new excitement in the form of Soviet soldiers who've spent 4 years developing strong opinions about German hospitality. The Wehrmacht's strategic retreats become less strategic and more panicked fleeing, leaving behind equipment, supplies, and occasionally their commitment to maintaining civilization. But the sun sets on another day in the 1,000-year Reich, which seems to be running about 990 years behind schedule, and somewhere else in the world, another geographic lottery is about to demonstrate that human creativity in creating suffering knows no national boundaries. Part 3. The Soviet Union under Stalin, 1930s. The German snow melts into Russian mud because apparently frozen misery and liquid misery are both equally available for your sampling pleasure. Welcome to the Soviet Union in 1932, where you've been born into Stalin's grand experiment in social engineering. The good news is that the revolution has promised to create a workers' paradise. The bad news is that the workers keep mysteriously disappearing, and paradise seems to involve significantly more starvation than advertised. The sheer size of the Soviet Union works against you in ways that would impress a geography teacher with a sadistic streak. When your village in Ukraine runs out of food, the nearest help is approximately 1,000 miles away through terrain that includes frozen tundra, impassable forests, and mountains that seem personally offended by human existence. Distance isn't just measured in miles here, it's measured in how many people die trying to cross it. Your parents whisper about kulaks, which sounds like a type of bread but apparently refers to farmers who committed the heinous crime of being slightly more successful than their neighbors. Success, it turns out, is counter-revolutionary. The state has helpfully solved this problem by taking all the successful farmers and sending them somewhere that definitely isn't Siberia, wink wink. The Ukrainian soil is among the most fertile on Earth, which makes the current famine particularly ironic. You're surrounded by black earth that could grow enough wheat to feed half of Europe, but the grain gets shipped to Moscow faster than you can say collectivization. The fields stretch to the horizon like a green carpet of potential food that you're not allowed to eat. Breakfast doesn't happen because there's no food. Lunch doesn't happen because there's still no food. Dinner is a philosophical discussion about what food might taste like if it existed. Your stomach makes sounds like an angry bear, which would be funny if bears weren't also starving and consequently more irritable than usual. The Soviet bureaucracy has perfected the art of making nothing happen very efficiently. Forms are required to request food, but forms require approval from officials who are too busy filling out forms to approve your forms. The system works perfectly, assuming the goal was to create a paperwork-based perpetual motion machine powered by human suffering. Winter means the temperature drops to levels that make German winters look tropical. Everything freezes: the rivers, the soil, your breath, and your increasingly slim chances of survival. The snow doesn't just fall, it accumulates with the persistence of someone who really, really wants you to suffer. Spring thaw reveals things that were better left buried under snow. Your neighbors start looking at their pets with expressions that suggest they're mentally calculating protein content. The pets, being smarter than the humans, have mostly disappeared already. Wild animals evacuate the area like they received advance warning about the human tendency to eat anything that moves when desperate enough. Education happens in schools that teach important subjects like the glory of collective farming, the importance of meeting production quotas, and why reporting your parents for counter-revolutionary activities is actually a form of patriotism. Mathematics involves calculating grain yields that exist only in official reports, and literature consists of reading stories about tractors that are probably more well-fed than you are. The NKVD operates with the efficiency of a postal service run by people who genuinely enjoy delivering bad news. They knock on doors at 3 a.m. because apparently evil has a preferred schedule. Your uncle disappears one Tuesday, and when you ask where he went, adults suddenly develop selective hearing problems. The vastness of Siberia becomes relevant when people start taking involuntary vacations there. The exile system works on the principle that if you send someone far enough into the wilderness, geography will solve your political problems for you. The gulags are located in places so remote that escape is theoretically possible, but practically equivalent to choosing a slower method of suicide. Food becomes currency in an economy where the official currency is increasingly worthless. A loaf of bread costs more than a month's wages, assuming you can find bread and assuming you have wages, and assuming your wages haven't been confiscated for failing to meet revolutionary enthusiasm quotas. Your village develops its own ecosystem of desperation. People trade family heirlooms for potato peels. Children disappear not because they've been arrested, but because they've literally become too weak to maintain visibility. The local church gets converted into a grain storage facility, which would be efficient if there were any grain to store. Medical care involves doctors who've been trained in revolutionary medicine, which emphasizes political health over physical health. Starvation gets diagnosed as insufficient commitment to the cause. Disease gets treated with increased productivity quotas. Death gets filed under natural causes, which is technically accurate if you consider human-engineered famine natural. The Communist Party organizes community meetings where everyone discusses how wonderful everything is, while slowly starving to death. Attendance is mandatory, enthusiasm is required, and bringing up minor issues like we're all dying is considered counter-revolutionary pessimism. The meetings happen in buildings that are heated about as well as the participants are fed. Soviet transportation infrastructure connects all the places you're not allowed to go. The trains run on schedule, but the schedule involves moving grain away from your region and moving political prisoners toward locations that don't officially exist. Walking to anywhere with food requires crossing terrain that includes wolves, bears, and temperature extremes that consider wolves and bears the friendly option. Your clothing consists of whatever hasn't been requisitioned for the war effort that hasn't started yet, but probably will soon. Fashion becomes purely theoretical, since most people are wearing the same clothes they put on last year and haven't taken off since. Laundry involves melting snow and hoping the soap substitute doesn't dissolve your remaining skin. Sleep happens on surfaces that make wooden planks seem luxurious. The buildings are constructed using Soviet efficiency, which means they keep out approximately half the weather on good days. The walls are thin enough that you can hear your neighbors' stomachs growling, creating a symphony of starvation that serves as your nightly lullaby. The irony becomes inescapable. You're living in a country with enough natural resources to supply half the world, managed by people who've somehow created shortages of everything, including common sense. The soil could feed millions, the forests could heat entire cities, and the mineral wealth could fund paradise. But the organizational system seems designed by someone who took efficiency advice from a suicide cult. But dawn breaks over another glorious day in the workers' paradise, and somewhere far from the frozen wasteland of revolutionary success, another corner of the world is preparing to demonstrate that humanity's talent for creating hell on earth knows no geographic boundaries. Part 4. Rwanda. During the genocide 1994, the Russian winter dissolves into African heat, where the warmth does absolutely nothing to thaw the human heart. You open your eyes in Rwanda, April 1994, and the radio is playing music that sounds cheerful, but carries words that make your blood freeze, despite the equatorial sun. The announcers are discussing cockroaches, but they're not talking about insects. They're talking about your neighbors. Rwanda sits almost exactly on the equator, which means the sun beats down with the consistency of someone who never learned when to quit. The heat would be manageable if you weren't constantly running for your life, but cardio becomes significantly more challenging when the people chasing you have machetes and instructions from the radio. The country's nickname is Land of 1,000 Hills, which sounds poetic until you realize hills provide excellent hiding spots for people who want to kill you, and equally excellent vantage points for people trying to spot you hiding. The rolling green landscape looks like a postcard from paradise, if postcards typically featured mass murder as a tourist attraction. Your parents wake you at dawn, not for breakfast. There isn't any meals, but because the neighbors have started organizing morning activities that don't involve the traditional farming or market visits. These activities seem to center around collecting farming tools, particularly machetes, and discussing the cleansing that needs to happen before noon. The Rwandan terrain works against survival in ways that would fascinate a military strategist. The country is landlocked, surrounded by countries that are either dealing with their own problems or thoughtfully closed their borders. Lake Kivu to the west looks beautiful and would be perfect for swimming, if swimming involved dodging bodies floating downstream from yesterday's festivities. Radio stations have become instruction manuals for amateur genocide. The broadcasts provide helpful tips like which roads to avoid, which hiding places have been discovered, and which neighbors have been particularly enthusiastic about their new hobby of ethnic cleansing. The radio waves carry across the hills with crystal clarity, ensuring nobody misses the daily updates on who needs killing. Your family's ethnicity gets determined by physical characteristics that require measuring tools and anthropological theories that sound scientific but were invented by people who clearly failed biology. The difference between living and dying comes down to nose width and height measurements, which would be ridiculous if it weren't so immediately fatal. The April rains start exactly when they're supposed to, because nature maintains its schedule regardless of human stupidity. The tropical downpours turn the red dirt roads into rivers of mud mixed with blood, creating a color palette that would impress abstract artists if abstract artists typically worked with human remains. Churches become collection points for people seeking sanctuary, which works about as well as you'd expect when the people offering sanctuary are the same ones discussing cockroach elimination techniques. The stone buildings that once echoed with hymns now echo with screams, proving that acoustics work the same regardless of what sounds they're amplifying. Food becomes irrelevant when your life expectancy is measured in hours rather than meals. The markets close because vendors are busy either killing customers or being killed by them. The restaurants shut down because the staff has been redistributed between grave digging and grave filling duties. The education system pivots from teaching reading and arithmetic to teaching identification techniques and tool usage. Children learn to recognize enemy characteristics with the dedication usually reserved for multiplication tables. School buildings repurpose themselves as processing centers for activities that definitely aren't covered in standard curricula. The Rondon Postal Service continues operating with admirable efficiency, delivering mail to addresses where the recipients have been chopped into pieces and scattered across several postal codes. The dedication to bureaucratic normalcy in the midst of systematic murder shows impressive commitment to professional standards. Medical facilities experience a sudden surge in patients suffering from machete-related injuries, which wasn't covered extensively in medical school. The hospitals run out of bandages, anesthesia, and hope in roughly that order. Doctors find themselves treating wounds that were inflicted by people who might return to finish the job. The Thousand Hills provide natural amphitheaters for the sounds of genocide, ensuring that screams carry across valleys with remarkable clarity. The echo effect means you can hear yesterday's massacres reverberating off today's killing sites, creating a surround sound experience that nobody requested. Transportation networks become escape routes for people fleeing in one direction and hunting routes for people traveling in the other direction. The roads that once connected communities now serve as conveyor belts for refugees who may or may not reach their destinations with all their original body parts. The international community watches with the engaged interest of people observing a nature documentary about predators eliminating prey. Humanitarian aid consists of strongly worded letters and expressions of concern, which turn out to be less effective against machetes than you might hope. Sleep becomes impossible, not just because of the screaming, but because the smell of decomposition carries on the night breeze with the persistence of someone who really wants your attention. The tropical heat accelerates decomposition, creating an olfactory experience that makes breathing and exercising controlled vomiting. Your childhood games change from hide and seek to just hide, with the understanding that being found means experiencing firsthand how sharp farming tools can be when applied to human anatomy. The playground equipment stands empty because playgrounds have been repurposed as execution sites, which somewhat dampens the recreational atmosphere. The ironies pile up like the bodies you're living in a Christian country where loving your neighbor has been reinterpreted as chopping your neighbor into manageable pieces. You're in a farming community where the main crop has become human misery. You're in a place known for its natural beauty, where the landscape is being redecorated with genocide. The weather remains consistently tropical and pleasant, because climate doesn't adjust its patterns to accommodate human evil. The flowers continue blooming, the birds keep singing, and the sun maintains its cheerful disposition, while humans demonstrate that paradise can be converted into hell with sufficient motivation and readily available farm tools. But the sun sets over another day in the land of 1,000 hills, and somewhere else on this planet, another geographic location is preparing to host humanity's next demonstration that suffering is a universal language with many local dialects. Part 5. China. During the Great Leap Forward, 1958 to 1962, the African heat evaporates into Chinese smog, where the sky has turned the color of industrial ambition mixed with ecological regret. You arrive in China during 1959, which is either the best possible timing or the worst possible timing, depending on whether you enjoy participating in humanity's most ambitious attempt to violate the laws of physics, economics, and basic common sense simultaneously. Chairman Mao has decided that China should overtake Britain in steel production within 15 years, which sounds reasonable until you realize the plan involves melting down cooking pots in backyard furnaces, operated by people who think metallurgy is a type of weather forecast. The Great Leap Forward has begun, and it's leaping directly off a cliff while insisting that gravity is a capitalist conspiracy. China stretches across terrain that includes deserts, mountains, rivers, and several climate zones, all of which are now required to produce steel regardless of their previous commitments to things like agriculture or supporting human life. The Gobi Desert receives instructions to increase industrial output, which would be impressive if sand had any natural inclination toward becoming useful metal. Your village gets assigned a steel production quota that would challenge actual steel mills operated by actual steel workers using actual steel-making equipment. Your neighbors receive training in metallurgy that lasts approximately 15 minutes and covers everything except how to actually make steel. The furnaces they build look like clay ovens designed by someone who learned engineering from fortune cookies. Food production takes a backseat to steel production because apparently you can eat metal if you're sufficiently revolutionary about it. The farmers abandon their fields to make steel that turns out to be unusable for anything, except demonstrating why farmers should stick to farming. The crops rot in the fields while everyone enthusiastically produces pig iron that's primarily useful for disappointing industrial inspectors. The sparrows receive a declaration of war because they eat grain that belongs to the people. The entire population gets mobilized to kill sparrows through coordinated noise-making, banging pots and shouting until the birds die from exhaustion. This works brilliantly until the insects previously eaten by sparrows celebrate their liberation by devouring the remaining crops with the enthusiasm of teenagers at an all-you-can-eat buffet. Your daily routine involves attending struggle sessions, where people confess to crimes against agricultural productivity that they didn't commit but probably thought about committing. The sessions happen in buildings heated by burning furniture, books, and occasionally hope. Attendance is mandatory, enthusiasm is required, and expressing doubt about the feasibility of quintupling rice yields is considered counter-revolutionary pessimism. Chinese cuisine becomes increasingly theoretical as actual food becomes increasingly hypothetical. Restaurants close because there's nothing to serve except revolutionary fervor, which doesn't taste as good as it sounds. Your grandmother's recipe collection becomes more valuable than currency, not because you can trade it, but because reading about food is the closest you'll get to experiencing it. The weather doesn't cooperate with the revolutionary enthusiasm. Droughts arrive right on schedule because climate doesn't adjust its patterns to accommodate political ambitions. The floods follow the droughts with the persistence of someone who really enjoys making bad situations worse. The natural disasters combine with human disasters to create a perfect storm of suffering that would impress meteorologists if they weren't too busy starving to appreciate the irony. Educational institutions pivot to teaching important subjects like how to increase agricultural yields through sheer determination and how to identify rightist tendencies in vegetables that aren't growing fast enough. Science classes cover revolutionary biology, where plants can be convinced to grow faster through proper ideological instruction. Mathematics involves calculating impossible production targets using enthusiasm as a multiplier. The transportation network gets repurposed for moving useless steel from places where it was made badly to places where it can disappoint people more efficiently. The trains run on time when they run at all, carrying cargo that nobody wants to destinations that don't need it. The roads fill with people walking toward rumors of food in locations that probably don't exist. Medical facilities experience a boom in patients suffering from malnutrition, which gets diagnosed as insufficient revolutionary spirit. Doctors treat starvation with political education and positive thinking. Hospitals run out of medicine, food, and patients, in roughly that order, as people develop the good sense to die at home rather than travel to places where they'll die surrounded by bureaucracy. Your clothing situation becomes creative. as textiles get redirected toward making flags and banners celebrating the success of programs that are demonstrably failing. Fashion becomes purely functional, and a thing that covers your increasingly visible skeleton counts as formal wear. Shoes become luxury items, not because of cost, but because leather has been repurposed for making industrial equipment that doesn't work. The Chinese landscape gets rearranged by people who learned civil engineering from revolutionary pamphlets. Rivers get redirected by workers using enthusiasm instead of proper surveying equipment. Mountains get terraced by people who substitute determination for understanding how erosion works. The results are impressive in the same way that natural disasters are impressive. Sleep happens on empty stomachs in buildings that are gradually being disassembled for furnace fuel. The night sounds include the constant clanging of backyard steel production and the rumbling of stomachs that have given up hope of ever being filled again. Dreams involve food with the intensity usually reserved for religious visions. Communications happen through loudspeakers that broadcast updates about record-breaking harvests, while people starve in the shadows of empty granaries. The radio waves carry news of success across terrain where success looks suspiciously like failure wearing a party hat. Local officials report statistics that exist only in their imaginations and filing cabinets. The irony reaches levels that would challenge professional comedians. You're living in a country that invented gunpowder, paper, and the compass, now trying to make steel in flower pots while the population eats tree bark seasoned with revolutionary optimism. The same culture that gave the world advanced mathematics is calculating grain yields using numbers that would make accountants weep. Water buffalo look at the humans with expressions that suggest they're reconsidering their career choices. Wild animals evacuate areas where humans are conducting agricultural experiments that violate several natural laws simultaneously. Even the insects seem concerned about the sustainability of current food chain arrangements. The Great Leap Forward continues leaping in directions that seem to involve a lot of falling, but the sun rises over another day in the People's Republic, and somewhere across the vast expanse of human geography, another location is preparing to demonstrate that creative suffering comes in many flavors, and some of them involve Belgian bureaucracy. Part 6. Congo Free State under King Leopold II, 1885 to 1908. The Chinese smog clears into African humidity, where the air is thick enough to swim through and carries the scent of rubber trees mixed with human desperation. Welcome to the Congo Free State in 1895, where you've been born into King Leopold's personal business venture. The good news is that you're living in one of the most resource-rich places on Earth. The bad news is that you've become one of those resources, and the extraction process involves significantly more dismemberment than traditional mining operations. The Congo Basin covers an area roughly the size of Western Europe, which would be impressive if impressive didn't usually involve being able to travel freely across it. The rainforest stretches endlessly in all directions, creating a natural maze where every path leads either to more jungle or to people with machetes who work for the rubber company. The trees provide excellent shade, assuming you enjoy shade that comes with a side of forced labor. Your village sits next to a river that would be perfect for transportation, if transportation didn't involve being packed into boats with people who consider you cargo rather than passengers. The waterways connect to communities that were thriving before they discovered they lived on top of rubber trees, which turned out to be the geographic equivalent of winning a lottery where the prize is systematic exploitation. King Leopold has thoughtfully established a quota system where your village must produce a certain amount of rubber per month or face administrative penalties. The penalties involve creative applications of machetes to body parts that were attached to people who failed to meet their productivity targets. The quota increases monthly because apparently rubber trees are supposed to grow faster when motivated by human suffering. Your daily routine involves tapping rubber trees using techniques taught by overseers whose qualifications include being able to count severed hands and maintain accurate records of workplace accidents. The work starts before dawn and ends when you collapse, which creates a natural work-life balance where life becomes increasingly theoretical. Food becomes whatever you can forage between rubber tapping shifts, assuming the foraging doesn't interfere with productivity targets. The forest provides plenty of food if you know where to look and have time to look and aren't too exhausted from rubber work to care about eating. Most days you meet one of these conditions, which creates interesting weight loss opportunities. The Belgian administrators operate with the efficiency of people who learned management techniques from medieval torture manuals. They maintain detailed records of production quotas, quota failures, and administrative responses to quota failures. The paperwork is immaculate, even when it's documenting activities that would make devils blush. Medical care involves traditional healers, whose patient load has increased dramatically since the rubber company introduced new forms of workplace injury. Amputation becomes the most common medical condition, which is challenging to treat using herbs and positive thinking. The traditional medicines work well for many ailments, but they haven't developed effective treatments for systematic mutilation. Your education consists of learning rubber tapping techniques and quota arithmetic. Advanced courses cover how to identify trees that will produce the most rubber with the least effort. The curriculum doesn't include reading or writing because literacy might give you ideas about labor rights or human dignity, which are counterproductive to rubber extraction. The Congo River system provides excellent transportation for moving rubber to market and administrative personnel to villages that need motivational visits. The boats arrive with clockwork regularity, bringing fresh overseers and taking away rubber and people who won't be returning to discuss their travel experiences. Communication happens through drum networks that carry messages across the forest faster than colonial telegraphs. The drums announce arrivals of rubber quotas, departures of people who failed to meet quotas, and weather updates that nobody requests but everyone receives. The traditional communication system works perfectly until the administrators ban drumming for security reasons. Sleep happens in villages that get quieter each month, as residents take involuntary trips to places that don't send postcards. The night sounds include crying from families whose members have experienced unfortunate hand-related accidents, and the splash of things being thrown into rivers that definitely aren't fish. The forest provides natural materials for building, crafting, and surviving, but touching these materials without permission constitutes theft from the state. Trees belong to the crown, animals belong to the crown, and people belong to the crown, with roughly the same legal status as the trees and animals. Wildlife viewing opportunities abound, assuming you enjoy observing animals that look healthier and better fed than the human population. The elephants seem concerned about the humans' living conditions, which is embarrassing when your situation inspires pity from creatures that don't understand economics. The tropical climate means everything grows quickly. Lists plants, diseases, and administrative enthusiasm for implementing creative management solutions. The humidity preserves organic materials excellently, which is unfortunate when those materials include evidence of activities that colonial administrators prefer not to document too thoroughly. Transportation infrastructure consists of paths that connect rubber-producing areas to river collection points. The roads are maintained by people whose road-building experience involves being forced to build roads under conditions that don't encourage careful attention to engineering standards. The results are impressive in the way that most disasters are impressive. Your family tree gets pruned regularly through administrative efficiency measures that reduce the number of people requiring food, shelter, and basic human dignity. Genealogy becomes a challenging hobby when relatives disappear with the frequency of seasonal weather patterns. The clothing situation involves whatever materials haven't been requisitioned for rope, bandages, or administrative equipment. Fashion becomes purely practical. Anything that covers enough skin to prevent total social collapse counts as formal wear. Shoes are theoretical concepts like workers' rights or fair wages. Local customs adapt to include new traditions like hiding when boats arrive and developing sophisticated techniques for looking busy while accomplishing nothing useful. Cultural practices evolve to emphasize survival skills that weren't traditionally necessary, such as bleeding control and rapid tree climbing. The economic system operates on principles that would confuse professional economists, assuming professional economists enjoyed studying markets, where the primary currency is human body parts, and the exchange rate fluctuates based on rubber prices in Brussels. But another day dawns in the Congo Free State, where freedom is purely theoretical and the state belongs to someone who's never visited. And somewhere across the ocean, another patch of geography is preparing to demonstrate that human suffering comes in flavors that match local agricultural conditions. Part 7. Ireland. During the Great Famine, 1845 to 1852. The African humidity evaporates into Irish mist, where the dampness seeps through everything, including your rapidly diminishing hopes for survival. You open your eyes in County Cork, 1846, and the smell hits you before anything else, the sweet, rotten stench of potato blight mixed with the salty tang of desperation. Ireland has just discovered that building an entire civilization around one type of potato was roughly as sensible as building a house on quicksand during an earthquake. The Irish landscape rolls green and beautiful in every direction, which would be more impressive if beauty were edible, and rolling hills could be harvested for nutrition. The countryside looks like a postcard from paradise, assuming postcards typically featured mass starvation as a tourist attraction, and paradise involves significantly more death than advertised. Your family's potato field has turned into what can only be described as agricultural apocalypse. The potatoes that should have fed you through winter have transformed into black putrid masses that smell like the devil's compost pile. The blight moves through the fields faster than gossip through a village, leaving behind acres of rotted dreams and the mathematical certainty of starvation. The British government has helpfully explained that this situation presents an excellent opportunity for Irish character development through experiencing adversity. They've established soup kitchens that serve portions so small they qualify as homeopathic nutrition, and workhouses that offer employment opportunities in dying slowly while performing meaningless labor. Irish weather contributes its traditional hospitality, rain that falls sideways with the persistence of someone who genuinely wants you to suffer, wind that cuts through clothing like it's personally offended by your attempts to stay warm, and fog that arrives precisely when you need to see where you're going. The climate seems designed by someone who took meteorological advice from a committee of sadists. Your daily routine involves walking to places that might have food, discovering they don't, walking to other places that might have food, discovering they don't either, and then walking home to discuss with your family how walking builds character and character can substitute for nutrition if you're sufficiently optimistic about it. The workhouses operate on principles that would impress efficiency experts if efficiency experts specialized in converting living people into dead people using bureaucracy and inadequate food portions. The work involves breaking rocks that don't need breaking and building walls that don't need building, which creates employment opportunities that successfully avoid the problem of actually helping anyone. Food becomes whatever can be foraged, begged or imagined into existence through creative thinking. Grass soup becomes a delicacy when prepared with sufficient desperation. Tree bark can be eaten if you're willing to redefine the concept of edible to include things that were never intended for human consumption. Nettles provide nutrition and entertainment in the form of stinging sensations that distract from hunger. The British relief efforts demonstrate impressive commitment to helping Ireland learn valuable lessons about self-reliance. Corn arrives from America, but it's Indian corn that requires processing techniques not readily available to people whose processing equipment has been sold to pay rent. The corn is roughly as digestible as gravel, but significantly less nutritious. Transportation becomes a one-way journey for people walking toward ports, with the hope of finding ships that might transport them to places where food exists. The roads fill with families carrying everything they own, which increasingly means carrying nothing except the clothes they're wearing and the hope that America might be real and might have potatoes that don't rot. Your village population decreases weekly through a combination of starvation, disease, and emigration to places that may or may not exist, but definitely can't be worse than here. The houses empty one by one as families either die or leave, creating a housing market where property values are measured in whether the roof still keeps out most of the rain. Medical care involves doctors whose treatment options include recommending emigration, suggesting prayer, and occasionally providing laudanum for pain management during the dying process. The medical profession adapts quickly to treating conditions that weren't extensively covered in medical school, such as complete societal collapse and government-assisted famine. The Irish language adapts to include new vocabulary for describing types of hunger that don't have names in well-fed societies. The traditional music becomes increasingly mournful, not through artistic choice, but because it's difficult to maintain upbeat tempos when the musicians are slowly starving to death. Education continues in schools that teach increasingly theoretical subjects as the student population emigrates or dies. Mathematics involves calculating how long food supplies will last, which creates word problems that are depressingly practical. Literature focuses on stories about places where people have enough to eat, which serves as either inspiration or torture, depending on your perspective. The landlord system continues operating with admirable efficiency, collecting rents from people who no longer have money or food, but somehow still owe money for the privilege of starving on land they can't afford to leave. Evictions happen with clockwork regularity, because apparently homelessness improves the character-building potential of starvation. Sleep happens on empty stomachs in houses that are gradually being emptied of anything that can be sold, eaten, or burned for warmth. The night sounds include crying from families whose members have emigrated or died, and the wind through empty houses where entire families used to live before they discovered that dignity doesn't provide adequate nutrition. Irish traditional crafts adapt to focus on making items that can be traded for food or transportation. Lace making becomes less about decorative arts and more about creating products that might convince someone in a different country to provide passage away from the island that's trying to kill you through systematic negligence. The weather station would report typical Irish conditions: persistent dampness, irregular sunshine, and precipitation that seems personally committed to making outdoor survival as challenging as possible. The climate remains consistently inhospitable, because apparently nature decided to cooperate with government policy for once. Local customs evolve to include new traditions like wake parties for people who aren't dead yet, but probably will be soon, and farewell ceremonies for people emigrating to places they'll probably never reach alive. Cultural practices adapt to emphasize skills that weren't traditionally necessary, such as identifying which types of grass are least poisonous and maintaining hope in the face of overwhelming evidence that hope is irrational. The economic system operates on principles that would fascinate economists studying markets, where the primary currency is suffering and the exchange rate involves trading human dignity for temporary postponement of death. The GDP consists entirely of potatoes that don't exist, and people who are leaving as quickly as possible. But the sun sets over another day in the Emerald Isle, where the emerald color comes from all the grass people are trying to eat, and somewhere across the Pacific, another geographic lottery winner is about to discover that paradise can be converted into hell using nothing but superior firepower and very poor timing. Part 8. Japan during the final years of World War II, 1944 to 1945. The Irish mist burns away in nuclear fire, where the morning sun is suddenly much brighter than anyone requested, and significantly more radioactive than traditional sunrises. You wake up in Hiroshima, August 1945, and today is going to be either perfectly ordinary or the most extraordinary day in human history. The calendar suggests it's just another Tuesday, but the B-29 bombers circling overhead seem to have different plans for your morning schedule. Japan consists of islands, which normally provides excellent natural defense against invasion, but turns out to be less helpful when your enemies have developed airplanes and a personal grudge against your continued existence. Being surrounded by water means there's nowhere to run except into more water, which is problematic when the people chasing you have boats, planes, and an impressive commitment to turning your homeland into a crater. The mountainous terrain that makes Japan beautiful also makes it perfect for hiding from bombers, assuming you enjoy hiding in caves with insufficient food, and the constant possibility that the mountain might collapse on top of you. The volcanic soil that makes everything grow magnificently has been repurposed for growing nothing except despair and emergency rations that taste like cardboard seasoned with patriotic duty. Your breakfast consists of whatever can be scraped together from rationing systems that are rationing the rations. Rice has become a luxury item, Vegetables are theoretical concepts, and meat exists only in government propaganda about how well-fed everyone is. The morning meal involves eating pine needle tea and sweet potatoes that have been stretched with sawdust, which provides fiber, if not nutrition. Air raid sirens have replaced roosters as your daily alarm clock, because apparently the Americans have decided that sleeping late is un-American and must be discouraged through the application of high explosives. The bombers arrive with the punctuality of postmen, except postmen don't typically deliver packages that explode and level city blocks. The neighborhood changes daily due to American urban redevelopment projects that involve dropping incendiary bombs on residential areas. Streets disappear overnight, along with the families who lived on them and the shops where you used to buy things back when shops existed and you had money to buy things with. School happens in underground shelters, where children learn important subjects like how to distinguish between different types of bomber engines and which building materials provide the best protection against firebombing. Mathematics involves calculating blast radii and probability statistics for survival, which makes arithmetic significantly more urgent than traditional homework. Your clothing consists of whatever hasn't been repurposed for military uniforms or burned in firebombing raids. Fashion becomes purely practical. Anything that's fireproof and covers enough skin to prevent immediate death counts as formal wear. Shoes are constructed from whatever materials can be found that were originally intended for other purposes entirely. The volcanic islands that make up Japan provide excellent earthquake activity, because apparently natural disasters wanted to participate in the general theme of everything trying to kill you. The ground shakes regularly, which would be concerning under normal circumstances, but becomes just another Tuesday when you're already dealing with daily bombing raids. Food production involves growing vegetables in whatever soil hasn't been contaminated by bomb fragments or converted into military installations. The traditional Japanese agricultural techniques work wonderfully when there are farmers to farm in fields that haven't been turned into craters. Rice paddies become especially challenging to maintain when they're being used as bomb targets for pilot training. The transportation system adapts to work around daily destruction of bridges, railway lines, and roads. Trains run when the tracks exist, buses operate when there's fuel and roads, and walking becomes the primary means of transportation for people traveling to places that may no longer exist when they arrive. Medical facilities experience unprecedented demand for treating injuries that weren't extensively covered in traditional medical training. Burns from firebombing raids, injuries from building collapses, and malnutrition from systematic food shortages create patient loads that challenge doctors whose medical supplies have been requisitioned for military use. The Pacific Ocean provides beautiful views that are occasionally interrupted by American ships on the horizon, preparing to deliver more urban improvement projects. The water that once provided protection now serves as a highway for people who seem very committed to expressing their displeasure with Japanese foreign policy through explosive means. Communications happen through radio broadcasts that report glorious victories, while the listeners sit in bomb shelters eating grass soup and wondering where all these victories are happening, because they certainly aren't happening in any locations visible from the smoking ruins of their neighborhoods. Sleep occurs during brief intervals between air raids, in shelters that are about as comfortable as sleeping inside a concrete filing cabinet. The night sounds include bomber engines, explosions, and the crackling of fires that are consuming whatever didn't get destroyed during daylight hours. Japanese traditional crafts adapt to focus on making items useful for wartime survival. Origami becomes less about decorative arts and more about creating practical items from whatever paper hasn't been used for military communications or burned for warmth. The artistic traditions continue, but they increasingly involve themes of mortality and impermanence, which turn out to be remarkably relevant. The weather provides its traditional seasonal changes, but the seasons are now measured in bombing intensities rather than temperature variations. Spring brings cherry blossoms and increased daylight bombing raids. Summer provides warm weather and firebombing campaigns. Autumn delivers beautiful foliage and the promise that winter bombing will be enhanced by reduced visibility. Your family adapts to living in conditions that make medieval peasants look prosperous and well-fed. Everyone develops new skills like identifying different types of aircraft by sound, calculating which buildings provide the best shelter, and determining which neighborhoods are most likely to be bombed based on strategic importance and American flight patterns. The mountainous terrain provides caves that serve as air raid shelters, storage areas, and sometimes permanent housing for families whose houses have been converted to ash by enthusiastic American bombers. Cave living involves unique challenges like flooding during rainy season and the occasional bear that objects to sharing its home with human refugees. Local customs evolved to include new traditions like community firefighting brigades and group prayers for the bombers to visit someone else's neighborhood today. Cultural practices adapt to emphasize survival skills that weren't traditionally part of Japanese education, such as treating burns and identifying which buildings are about to collapse. The economic system operates on principles that would confuse economists studying markets, where the primary currency is whatever hasn't been destroyed yet, and the exchange rate fluctuates based on how many bombers are visible on the horizon. Consumer goods consist entirely of things that people made themselves from materials they found in bombed buildings. But morning arrives over another day in the land of the rising sun, where the sun seems unusually bright today and is accompanied by a mushroom-shaped cloud that definitely wasn't in yesterday's weather forecast. And somewhere far away, another corner of the world is preparing to demonstrate that human creativity in generating suffering extends to places that have never heard of atomic weapons. Part 9. South Sudan since independence. 2011 present. The nuclear fire cools into African heat, where independence turned out to be less like freedom and more like a divorce where both parties keep the house and burn it down out of spite. Congratulations, you're born in South Sudan in 2012, making you a citizen of the world's newest country. The good news is that you're witnessing history in the making. The bad news is that the history being made involves creative new approaches to civil war, famine, and converting oil wealth into human misery with impressive efficiency. South Sudan sits on top of oil reserves that should make everyone rich, which would be wonderful if oil could be extracted using optimism and good intentions instead of functional governments and people who aren't actively shooting at each other. The black gold flows beneath soil that's increasingly stained with the red kind, creating a color scheme that would appeal to interior decorators with very dark sensibilities. The geography works against peace in ways that would impress military strategists. The country is landlocked, which means oil exports must travel through countries that have their own opinions about South Sudanese politics. The terrain includes swamps that provide excellent hiding places for armed groups, and seasonal flooding that ensures everyone gets equal opportunities to be miserable regardless of their tribal affiliations. Your village location depends on which armed group controls it this week, because the map changes more frequently than weather patterns. The boundaries between government-controlled areas, rebel-controlled areas, and areas controlled by people who aren't sure which group they're supposed to be fighting for shift like sand dunes in a windstorm. Water comes from sources that may or may not be contaminated with things that were never meant to be in drinking water, such as fuel, blood, and the decomposed remains of people who disagreed with someone's political opinions. The wells that once provided clean water now serve as convenient disposal sites for problems that need solving quickly and quietly. Education happens in schools that double as military recruitment centers, which creates interesting conflicts between learning mathematics and learning to disassemble automatic weapons. The curriculum covers traditional subjects like reading and arithmetic, plus newer subjects like identifying different types of gunfire and calculating how long food aid will last if distributed among varying numbers of surviving villagers. Your daily routine involves listening to adults discuss which neighboring villages have been burned this week and whether the smoke on the horizon represents enemy advances or just another community experiencing involuntary urban renewal. The conversations happen in hushed tones because speaking too loudly about military movements might attract unwanted attention from people with guns and strong opinions. Food aid arrives sporadically, depending on whether the roads are controlled by people who support international humanitarian efforts or people who prefer to redirect humanitarian supplies toward personal enrichment projects. The aid trucks navigate through checkpoints operated by armed groups who have developed creative taxation systems for humanitarian convoys. The oil infrastructure provides jobs for people whose qualifications include being alive and not currently shooting at the oil company employees. The petroleum industry operates with the efficiency of people trying to extract resources while dodging bullets and avoiding kidnapping by competing factions, who all believe they deserve larger shares of the oil revenue. Medical facilities serve patients suffering from conditions that medical schools don't typically cover extensively, such as caught in crossfire, village burned down, and accidentally witnessed war crimes. The hospitals that haven't been bombed, burned, or converted into military bases provide treatment using supplies that arrive when the roads are safe and leave when the security situation deteriorates. Sleep happens to the soundtrack of gunfire that might be celebratory, defensive, or recreational depending on who's doing the shooting and what they're celebrating, defending, or recreating. The night sounds include crying from families whose members have been recruited by armed groups and the rumble of vehicles that may be delivering supplies or people who plan to take supplies away. Transportation involves traveling on roads that serve as highways for refugees fleeing in one direction and armed groups advancing in the other direction. The vehicles that still run operate on fuel that costs more than most people earn in months, assuming they earn anything, and assuming there's anywhere to spend money if they had it. The rainy season turns roads into rivers and refugee camps into swamps, which provides equal opportunity misery for everyone regardless of their political affiliations. The dry season means dust storms that make everything the color of disappointment and heat that would be unbearable if you weren't already dealing with problems that make heat seem like a minor inconvenience. Your family tree gets pruned through military recruitment drives that target children who look old enough to carry weapons, which includes children who probably aren't old enough but look mature for their age due to malnutrition and stress-induced premature aging. The recruitment process involves career counseling sessions that emphasize the growth opportunities available in armed conflict. Communication happens through networks that carry news about which areas are safe to visit and which areas have been redesignated as free-fire zones. The traditional information systems work efficiently for spreading warnings about military movements, food distributions, and changes in local government that involve people with different uniforms and similar approaches to conflict resolution. The economic system operates on principles that would fascinate economists studying markets where the primary currency is bullets, and the exchange rate fluctuates based on which faction controls the oil wells this week. Consumer goods consist of whatever can be traded, stolen, or manufactured from materials salvaged from destroyed buildings. Wildlife viewing opportunities include observing animals that have learned to avoid areas where humans congregate, demonstrating that animals have better survival instincts than the humans who are shooting at each other over political disagreements that could probably be resolved through less explosive means. Local customs adapt to include new traditions like community early warning systems for approaching armed groups and shared techniques for identifying which faction uniform means you should hide and which means you should pretend to be enthusiastic about their political objectives. Cultural practices evolved to emphasize skills that weren't traditionally part of South Sudanese education, such as distinguishing between different types of military vehicles by sound. The independence celebrations continue annually, though the festivities are somewhat dampened by the ongoing civil war, economic collapse, and humanitarian crisis that have characterized most of the country's existence as an independent nation. The anniversary parties happen in locations that haven't been bombed recently, and feature speeches about progress that exist primarily in the speeches themselves. Your childhood games evolve from traditional activities to more contemporary entertainments like Guess Which Faction Controls Our Neighborhood Today and Identify the Safest Route to the Water Source. The playground equipment consists of whatever hasn't been melted down for scrap metal or repurposed for military applications. But the sun sets over another day in the world's newest country, where newness doesn't seem to correlate with improvement, and somewhere across the globe, another patch of geography is preparing to demonstrate that human suffering speaks a universal language with distinctly local accents, including Caribbean variations. Part 10. Haiti. During the Duvalier regimes 1957 to 1986, the African heat dissolves into Caribbean warmth, where paradise comes with a side of political terror, and the palm trees sway to the rhythm of people screaming in detention centers. You arrive in Haiti during 1970, which means you're living in a tropical paradise that's been converted into hell, using nothing but creative politics, voodoo-enhanced fear tactics, and a secret police force that makes the Gestapo look like community volunteers with anger management issues. Haiti occupies the western third of an island that Christopher Columbus called the most beautiful land human eyes have ever seen, which would be more impressive if beautiful land came with functional governments and people who weren't constantly disappearing in the middle of the night. The Caribbean location means perfect weather year-round for activities like hiding from death squads and wondering why paradise comes with so much systematic torture. The Tonton Macoute patrol your neighborhood with the regularity of postal workers, except postal workers don't typically carry machetes and wear sunglasses, designed to hide the fact that they're probably enjoying their job too much. These unofficial police officers have received training in crowd control techniques that emphasize permanent solutions to temporary problems. Your family's morning routine involves checking to see which neighbors have disappeared overnight and calculating whether today might be a good day to avoid eye contact with anyone wearing blue denim and dark sunglasses. The Macoutes dress like they're going to a casual Friday meeting at the office of systematic intimidation, which is essentially what they're doing. Papa Doc Duvalier has established a personality cult that combines traditional voodoo with modern dictatorship techniques, creating a system where political opposition isn't just illegal, it's literally cursed. He's convinced much of the population that he's the earthly representative of Baron Samedi, the voodoo spirit of death, which explains why his political rallies feel more like funeral preparations than civic events. The tropical climate means everything grows quickly, to plants, diseases, and political paranoia. The heat and humidity create perfect conditions for cultivating fear, which flourishes in Haiti like nowhere else on Earth. The palm trees provide excellent shade for outdoor torture sessions, and the beautiful beaches offer convenient disposal sites for people who've had unfortunate encounters with government efficiency. Education involves learning which questions not to ask, which neighbors not to trust, and which facial expressions to avoid making when Papa Doc's portrait is mentioned. Schools teach traditional subjects like mathematics and literature, plus newer courses like advanced silence techniques and beginner's guide to looking politically neutral. The curriculum emphasizes skills that promote survival rather than critical thinking. Your daily food consists of whatever can be purchased with money that hasn't been confiscated through creative taxation methods, eaten by people who haven't disappeared for asking why food costs so much, and prepared by people who haven't been recruited for involuntary government service. The local markets operate when the vendors haven't fled to other countries, and when the customers haven't been arrested for suspicious purchasing behavior. The Haitian mountains provide beautiful scenery and excellent hiding places for people who've developed differing opinions about current government policies. The peaks offer spectacular views of the Caribbean and convenient vantage points for spotting approaching Tonton Macoute patrols. The caves in the mountainside serve as temporary housing for people whose permanent housing has been redistributed to government supporters. Port-au-Prince operates like a city-sized prison where most of the guards are prisoners who don't know they're prisoners, and most of the prisoners are guards who don't know they're guards. The streets fill with people who walk quickly and avoid making eye contact, creating an urban atmosphere that resembles a very polite zombie apocalypse. Medical care involves doctors whose patient confidentiality agreements have been expanded to include not reporting suspicious injuries, treating people who officially don't exist, and maintaining detailed ignorance about how their patients acquired conditions that suggest encounters with creative interrogation techniques. The hospitals serve patients suffering from ailments that aren't typically covered in medical textbooks, such as asked wrong question and looked at official wrong way. The voodoo traditions blend with political reality to create a spiritual system where the spirits of the dead are less frightening than the living representatives of government authority. Traditional ceremonies now include prayers for protection from secular dangers that are more immediate and tangible than supernatural threats. The local spirits seem genuinely concerned about competition from human evil. Transportation involves traveling on roads that connect communities where people used to live before they moved away suddenly without leaving forwarding addresses. The buses run when there's fuel and when the drivers haven't been recruited for alternative employment opportunities in remote locations that don't appear on standard maps. Your childhood games adapt to emphasize skills that promote longevity rather than entertainment. Hide and seek becomes less about seeking and more about hiding. Tag involves rules about not being tagged by people wearing unofficial uniforms. Traditional children's songs acquire new verses about keeping quiet and looking innocent. Sleep happens in houses where people whisper after dark because walls have ears and ears have owners who report interesting conversations to people who collect interesting information. The night sounds include crying from families whose members have taken unexpected trips, vehicles arriving at irregular hours, and the splash of objects being dropped into the harbour that probably aren't garbage. The economic system operates on principles that would fascinate economists studying markets, where the primary currency is political loyalty, and the exchange rate fluctuates based on how well you demonstrate enthusiasm for government policies you don't understand. Employment opportunities exist primarily in fields that involve surveillance, intimidation, and disappearing people who ask for better employment opportunities. Communication happens through networks that specialize in not communicating anything that might be interpreted as politically interesting. The traditional storytelling culture adapts to focus on tales that don't accidentally reference current events, political figures, or anything else that might require explanation to people who ask questions professionally. The beautiful Caribbean beaches serve multiple functions: tourism promotion, recreation for people who can afford recreation, and convenient locations for activities that tourism brochures don't typically mention. The coral reefs provide excellent fishing opportunities and natural disposal systems for problems that require oceanic solutions. Local industries include agriculture that produces crops for export to countries where people can afford to buy food, manufacturing that creates products for people who have money to spend on manufactured goods, and government services that specialize in ensuring everyone understands current political realities through hands-on educational experiences. The tropical paradise continues operating as advertised, with beautiful weather, stunning scenery, and a political system that makes medieval torture chambers look like progressive rehabilitation centers. The palm trees sway in ocean breezes that carry the scent of flowers mixed with human fear, creating an atmosphere that would appeal to tourists with very specific interests in dark tourism. Your family develops survival strategies that emphasize invisibility, political neutrality, and the ability to appear enthusiastic about government policies without actually understanding what those policies involve. Everyone learns to smile appropriately, clap at designated times, and avoid asking questions that might require answers that no one wants to provide. But another day ends in the Caribbean paradise, where paradise comes with terms and conditions that weren't mentioned in the travel brochures. And somewhere across the world, another geographic lottery is preparing to demonstrate that human creativity in generating suffering includes Asian variations, with distinctive local characteristics. Part Elf, North Korea 1950s present. The Caribbean warmth freezes into Korean winter, where the cold comes not just from the weather, but from the gradually dawning realization that you've been born into humanity's most successful attempt at creating a real-life dystopian novel. Welcome to North Korea in 1995, during what the government calls the arduous march, and what everyone else calls that time when the country forgot how to feed people, but remembered how to maintain nuclear weapons programs. You've arrived just in time to participate in humanity's most ambitious experiment in making an entire population disappear while they're still technically alive. The Korean peninsula gets divided at the 38th parallel, which sounds mathematical and precise until you realize it's the line between moderately functional society and place where reality has been replaced with propaganda and hunger. The geographic lottery has placed you on the wrong side of the line, which is unfortunate since crossing it involves risking death, and staying involves risking slower death. Your birth certificate doubles as enrollment in the world's most comprehensive surveillance program, where every citizen gets personal attention from government monitors who track your location, thoughts, and facial expressions with the dedication of stalkers who've been given official jobs and unlimited authority. Privacy becomes a theoretical concept, like unicorns or adequate nutrition. The mountains that cover 70% of North Korea provide beautiful scenery and excellent natural barriers for keeping people from leaving, which solves the emigration problem through geographic imprisonment. The terrain is perfect for hiding prison camps that definitely don't exist according to official sources, which explains why satellite images show large installations that nobody talks about. Your daily routine begins with mandatory reverence for portraits of leaders who've achieved the impressive feat of remaining politically active despite being dead for decades. The personality cult operates with the efficiency of people who've confused religious worship with political science, creating a system where asking questions about inconsistencies is both heretical and treasonous. Food distribution follows a caste system that would impress medieval feudal lords with its creative approach to institutionalized inequality. Your family's position in the social hierarchy determines whether you receive enough calories to maintain consciousness, or just enough to maintain technical biological function, while slowly starving with dignity. The education system teaches subjects like mathematics, science, and the impressive mathematical principle that 2 + 2 equals whatever the party says it equals. History classes cover world events with fascinating creative interpretations that would impress fantasy novelists if fantasy novelists specialized in writing alternate reality fiction when North Korea is the most successful country on Earth. Electricity arrives sporadically, creating opportunities to appreciate candlelight ambiance during unscheduled romantic dinners that happen whether you're feeling romantic or not. The power grid operates with the reliability of someone who learned electrical engineering through trial and error, mostly error, which explains why satellite images of North Korea at night look like a black hole surrounded by functioning countries. Your neighborhood speakers broadcast daily announcements about agricultural successes, military victories, and other achievements that exist primarily in the announcements themselves. The loudspeakers work consistently, unlike most other infrastructure, because apparently maintaining propaganda networks takes priority over maintaining water systems or food distribution. Medical care involves doctors whose training emphasized political loyalty over medical knowledge, which creates interesting challenges when treating patients suffering from conditions like malnutrition, political stress disorder, and injuries that result from trying to express opinions about government efficiency. The hospitals operate with equipment that would be considered antique in functional countries and supplies that exist mainly in administrative reports. The economy operates on principles that would confuse economists studying markets where the primary currency is political compliance, and the exchange rate involves trading human dignity for temporary postponement of imprisonment. Consumer goods consist of whatever can be manufactured using technology from previous decades and materials that weren't already requisitioned for military purposes. Transportation involves trains that run when they run and don't run when they don't run, creating scheduling systems that emphasize flexibility and patience. The locomotives operate using coal when coal is available, and determination when coal isn't available, which explains why train travel often involves pushing the train as much as riding in it. Your family develops communication techniques that involve saying things without saying them, and understanding things that aren't said, creating conversational skills that would impress professional spies if professional spies were allowed to visit North Korea, and if they weren't too busy being imprisoned for being professional spies. The agricultural system produces impressive crop yields according to official statistics and actual food shortages, according to people who are trying to eat the statistics. The farms operate using techniques that combine traditional Korean agriculture with revolutionary improvements like quotas that exceed physical possibility and fertilizer that exists primarily in planning documents. Winter brings temperatures that make survival challenging under the best circumstances, which North Korea definitely doesn't provide. Heating fuel becomes more valuable than gold, which would be useful if anyone had gold or if having gold wasn't considered evidence of counter-revolutionary capitalist tendencies, punishable by re-education. The prison camp system operates with the efficiency of people who've perfected the art of making people disappear without technically killing them, just relocating them to places where they can contribute to society through mining coal with insufficient food and inadequate tools. The camps provide job opportunities for people whose qualifications include having relatives who asked inconvenient questions. Entertainment involves approved cultural activities that celebrate the wisdom of leadership and the joy of collective struggle against imaginary enemies who are definitely plotting to destroy North Korean happiness through infiltration of foreign ideas like adequate nutrition and basic human rights. The movies all have happy endings where everyone learns to love the government more than their own families. Your childhood involves learning skills that promote survival in an environment where survival depends on appearing completely satisfied with conditions that would make prison inmates riot. Children's games focus on identifying capitalist infiltrators and practicing appropriate expressions of gratitude for government services that don't actually exist. Sleep happens in houses that are warm enough to prevent immediate death from exposure and comfortable enough to allow rest between shifts of mandatory community service activities. The night sounds include the hum of propaganda broadcasts and the silence of people who've learned that making noise after bedtime attracts unwanted attention from night shift surveillance personnel. Communication with the outside world happens through methods that don't happen, because the outside world officially consists of countries that are jealous of North Korean success and therefore can't be trusted with accurate information about how successful North Korea actually is. The internet exists for government officials who need to monitor foreign propaganda about North Korean conditions that definitely don't match reality. But morning arrives in the Democratic People's Republic, where democracy, people's rights, and republicanism are defined through revolutionary improvements that would surprise people who thought they understood what those words meant, and somewhere across distant oceans, another geographic location is preparing to demonstrate that medieval problems can persist into modern times with remarkable consistency. Part 12. Europe. During the Black Death, 1347 to 1351. The Korean winter melts into medieval European spring, where the flowers are blooming, the birds are singing, and approximately half the population is developing interesting new symptoms that suggest this season's fashion trend is rapid onset mortality with distinctive skin discoloration. You open your eyes in London, 1348, and the first thing you notice is the smell. It's not just the usual medieval aroma of unwashed humans and creative approaches to waste management. There's something new in the air that combines rotting flesh with the sweet scent of societal collapse. The Black Death has arrived, and it's brought friends. Medieval Europe has excellent transportation networks for the 14th century, which means roads that connect every community to every other community, creating the perfect distribution system for spreading plague faster than gossip travels through a monastery. The trade routes that normally carry silk and spices are now carrying something that's considerably less valuable and significantly more deadly. Your neighborhood operates on the principle that sanitation is optional, and medical knowledge consists mainly of theories that would make modern doctors weep if modern doctors existed, which they don't, because medicine hasn't been invented yet, and won't be for several centuries. The local physicians treat plague symptoms using techniques that include bloodletting, prayer, and herbal remedies that are about as effective as throwing flowers at a volcano. The bubonic plague creates distinctive symptoms that make diagnosis remarkably straightforward. You develop swellings the size of apples in uncomfortable places. Your skin turns interesting colors that weren't previously available in the human palate, and you die within approximately 3 to 7 days while experiencing discomfort that would challenge professional torture specialists. Food becomes whatever can be harvested by the decreasing number of people who are still alive and mobile, prepared by people who haven't died of plague yet. and eaten by people who are optimistic about their short-term survival prospects. The agricultural system operates with reduced staffing due to workforce attrition that exceeds normal seasonal employment fluctuations. Your daily routine involves stepping over bodies that are accumulating faster than they can be buried, avoiding people who are coughing blood, and participating in religious ceremonies that emphasize repentance for sins that apparently include the sin of existing during a plague epidemic. The church services happen in buildings that smell like incense mixed with decomposition, creating an atmosphere that's distinctly medieval. The European climate provides excellent conditions for plague transmission, with temperatures that keep the fleas active and humidity that preserves disease-carrying bacteria. The weather remains pleasantly seasonal, while the population experiences less pleasant seasonal die-offs that would impress demographers if demographics had been invented yet. Medical treatment involves physicians who wear leather masks, shaped like bird beaks filled with herbs that are supposed to filter plague vapors, creating a healthcare system that looks like it was designed by people who confused medicine with performance art. The doctors provide treatments that include burning aromatic woods, balancing bodily humors, and occasionally just running away to find employment in regions that haven't been visited by plague yet. Your family develops new traditions like daily mortality counts, creative body disposal techniques, and prayers that emphasize requests for immediate death rather than slow suffering. The household dynamics change when family members start disappearing at rates that challenge traditional kinship structures and inheritance laws. The economic system adapts to operate with a workforce that's been reduced by approximately 30 to 60%, depending on local plague efficiency rates. Labor becomes valuable because laborers become scarce, which creates unprecedented employment opportunities for people whose qualifications include being alive and conscious enough to perform basic tasks. Transportation involves traveling on roads that connect communities where people used to live before they developed terminal cases of medieval disease. The highways serve refugees fleeing from plague-infected areas toward other areas that will probably be infected soon, creating migration patterns that resemble very slow-moving stampedes of doomed people. Education happens in schools that teach important subjects like recognizing plague symptoms, calculating survival probabilities, and writing wills at ages when people normally learn to write their names. The curriculum emphasizes practical skills that promote survival, assuming survival lasts long enough to use the skills. Sleep occurs in beds that may have been recently vacated by people who won't be needing beds anymore, surrounded by night sounds that include coughing from neighbors who probably won't be neighbors much longer, and the rumble of carts collecting bodies for mass burial in graves that aren't quite large enough for the current demand. The plague spreads with the efficiency of people who learn disease transmission from professional plague specialists, moving from house to house with the regularity of postal delivery, except more fatal and more frequent. The infection rates demonstrate impressive commitment to equal opportunity illness distribution regardless of social class, economic status, or personal hygiene practices. Local customs evolve to include new traditions like plague dancing, which involves groups of people dancing frantically until they die of exhaustion, and flagellation processions, where people whip themselves publicly to demonstrate repentance for causing the plague through their moral failures. The cultural activities emphasize themes of mortality and divine judgment, which turn out to be remarkably relevant. The religious community provides spiritual guidance that explains how the plague represents God's displeasure with human behavior, which would be more helpful if the solutions involved anything more practical than prayer, repentance, and avoiding sin through dying before committing additional sins. The churches offer sanctuary that includes the same plague exposure as everywhere else, but with better acoustics for final prayers. Your childhood games adapt to emphasize themes that reflect current events, such as plague tag, where being tagged means pretending to die horribly, and funeral procession, where children practice carrying each other to imaginary graves. The entertainment options focus on activities that can be completed quickly in case participants develop sudden onset plague symptoms. The urban planning system gets restructured to accommodate increased demand for grave sites, cremation facilities, cities developed new zoning regulations that emphasize efficient corpse management and expedited property redistribution to accommodate rapid changes in property ownership due to owner mortality. Medical knowledge advances through practical experience with treating plague patients, which provides excellent learning opportunities for physicians who survive long enough to apply their new knowledge to subsequent patients. The medical profession develops innovative treatments that are consistently ineffective but demonstrate impressive creativity in approaches to failure. Communication happens through networks that specialize in spreading news about which communities have been completely eliminated by plague and which communities are still accepting refugees who probably aren't carrying plague but might be. The information systems work efficiently for coordinating survival strategies among people who probably won't survive long enough to implement them. But the sun sets over another day in medieval Europe, where the sunset is particularly beautiful because there are fewer people alive to appreciate it, and somewhere across the centuries, another time and place is preparing to demonstrate that human suffering is a remarkably consistent theme that transcends historical periods and geographic boundaries. Part 13. Poland. During World War II, 1939 to 1945, the medieval plague dissolves into modern warfare, where technology has advanced enough to kill people more efficiently, but not enough to make anyone reconsider whether killing people efficiently is a desirable goal. You wake up in Warsaw, September 1939, and the sound that interrupts your morning is not roosters or church bells, but Stuka dive bombers screaming toward your neighborhood with the enthusiasm of people who've been paid to express their opinions about Polish independence through high explosives. Poland has just become the testing ground for Germany's new approach to international diplomacy, which involves significantly more tanks than traditional diplomatic methods. Poland sits between Germany and Russia, like a sandwich filling between two slices of bread that have developed appetites for Polish territory. The geography that once made Poland a crossroads of European trade now makes it a crossroads of European invasion routes, which is considerably less profitable and significantly more explosive than the trade route business. Your country has the misfortune of being flat, which makes it perfect for agricultural production and equally perfect for tank operations. The Polish plains stretch endlessly in directions that provide excellent visibility for advancing armies and offer no natural barriers for people trying to avoid advancing armies. The terrain that grows excellent wheat also provides excellent tank country, which creates conflicts between agricultural and military land use priorities. The Blitzkrieg demonstrates German efficiency, applied to the problem of making other countries stop existing as independent political entities. The Wehrmacht moves through Poland faster than bad news, travels through a small town, using tactics that combine airplanes, tanks, and a work ethic that would impress professional efficiency consultants specialized in systematic conquest. Your family's morning routine changes from reading newspapers about European political tensions to hiding in basements while European political tensions express themselves through artillery bombardments. The breakfast conversation shifts from discussing weather and local gossip to calculating which walls provide the best protection from shell fragments and whether the shooting outside sounds closer than yesterday. Food rationing begins immediately, because apparently the German supply chain management philosophy involves redirecting Polish agricultural output toward feeding German soldiers who are occupying Polish territory. The rationing system operates with mathematical precision that ensures Polish families receive exactly enough nutrition to maintain minimal biological function while slowly starving with Germanic efficiency. The education system gets restructured to emphasize subjects that promote German cultural values and Polish cultural elimination. Schools teach revised history where Poland never existed as an independent country, and mathematics where German students receive larger portions of available resources because of their superior Germanic mathematical abilities. The curriculum changes would be impressive if they weren't designed to systematically destroy intellectual development. Your neighborhood changes daily as buildings get redistributed through explosive urban redevelopment projects supervised by German engineers who learned architecture from military manuals. The streets get renamed using German names that nobody can pronounce correctly, which solves the navigation problem by making navigation impossible for everyone, including the Germans. The transportation system gets reorganized to prioritize moving people toward destinations they didn't choose and probably won't survive. The trains run on time with impressive German punctuality, carrying passengers who bought tickets they didn't want to places they never intended to visit for permanent vacations they won't enjoy. Medical care involves doctors whose patient load includes people suffering from conditions that weren't covered extensively in medical school, such as arbitrary arrest, systematic persecution, and coincidental gunshot wounds. The hospitals serve patients who develop symptoms that correlate suspiciously with their ethnic backgrounds, political opinions, and intellectual qualifications. The ghetto system provides concentrated housing for people whose housing qualifications include having ancestors who practiced the wrong religion in countries that no longer exist. The living arrangements emphasize efficiency through overcrowding, which solves the housing shortage by redefining adequate housing to include conditions that would challenge professional sardine packers. Your daily routine involves standing in queues for food that may not exist, distributed by people who may not care whether you receive any, using ration cards that may not be honored by authorities who may not recognize your right to continue existing. The waiting periods provide excellent opportunities for community bonding among people who are all slowly starving together. The resistance movement operates using organizational techniques that would impress business management consultants if business management consultants specialized in coordinating activities that result in immediate execution if discovered. The underground networks demonstrate impressive creativity in solving logistical problems like moving weapons, hiding people, and communicating information without attracting attention from people whose job involves noticing suspicious activities. Sleep happens in buildings that may not exist tomorrow morning, surrounded by night sounds that include gunfire, explosions, and the rumble of vehicles transporting people who won't be returning to discuss their travel experiences. The acoustic environment creates natural lullabies that emphasize themes of mortality and political oppression. The economic system operates on principles that involve confiscating everything valuable and redistributing it to people who didn't previously live in Poland, but now manage Polish economic resources using German management techniques. The currency consists of ration coupons, identification papers, and the hope that economic conditions might improve before everyone dies of starvation or gets shot. Communication happens through networks that specialize in not communicating anything that might interest German authorities, who collect information about Polish activities with the dedication of people who've made information gathering their primary hobby. The traditional social structures adapt to emphasize survival skills that weren't traditionally part of Polish culture, such as appearing invisible and developing selective amnesia about pre-war political opinions. The Polish winter provides excellent conditions for outdoor activities like freezing to death while hiding from German patrols, which creates seasonal recreation opportunities that weren't mentioned in Polish tourism brochures. The snow covers evidence of activities that German authorities prefer not to document thoroughly, which improves the aesthetic appearance of crime scenes. Your childhood games evolve to include entertainment activities like avoid the soldiers, identify the informants, and practice looking Polish enough to avoid additional scrutiny. The playground equipment gets repurposed for military applications, because apparently swing sets can be converted into useful materials for people who need materials more than children need playgrounds. Local customs adapt to include new traditions like community hiding techniques and group prayers for survival that emphasize immediate practical concerns rather than long-term spiritual development. Cultural practices evolve to focus on skills that promote longevity under occupation conditions, such as recognizing different types of military uniforms and calculating optimal responses to authority figures with various levels of homicidal enthusiasm. The agricultural system produces crops that get harvested by people who won't eat them and distributed to people who weren't involved in growing them. The farms operate using reduced labor forces due to workforce recruitment for involuntary employment opportunities in locations that provide housing, meals, and working conditions that definitely violate modern labor safety standards. Entertainment involves approved cultural activities that celebrate German cultural superiority and Polish cultural inferiority through educational programs that demonstrate why Polish independence was a historical mistake that has been corrected through military intervention. The movies, books, and music all emphasize themes of German success and Polish gratitude for being incorporated into a superior political system. But dawn breaks over another day in occupied Poland, where independence has been temporarily suspended pending further German administrative review, and somewhere across the Atlantic, another geographic location is preparing to demonstrate that human suffering comes in varieties that include distinctly American innovations in systematic oppression. Part 14. The American South as an Enslaved Person, 1700s to 1865. The Polish winter melts into southern heat, where the cotton grows white and beautiful, under a sun that beats down on fields worked by people who will never profit from their labor, and owned by people who profit without working. You open your eyes on a Virginia plantation in 1820, and the first sound you hear is the bell that signals another day of unpaid employment in humanity's most successful business model, based entirely on treating people like farm equipment that can reproduce itself, and occasionally needs medical attention to maintain productivity levels. The American South stretches across terrain that's perfect for growing crops that require intensive labor, which would be wonderful if the people providing the intensive labor received any compensation beyond the privilege of not being whipped today for working slower than yesterday. The geography includes vast flat areas ideal for plantation agriculture and swamps perfect for hiding people who've decided to terminate their employment contracts without providing proper notice. Your legal status falls somewhere between livestock and agricultural equipment, with rights and protections that would insult farm animals if farm animals understood constitutional law. The legal system operates on principles that would fascinate lawyers studying jurisprudence where humans can be owned, sold, and depreciated for tax purposes like other forms of capital investment. The plantation system operates with the efficiency of people who've perfected the art of extracting maximum labor from workers who can't quit, negotiate wages, or report workplace safety violations to authorities who care about workplace safety violations. The management structure emphasizes motivation techniques that include physical punishment, family separation, and creative applications of whips to encourage productivity improvements. Your daily routine begins before sunrise and ends after sunset, creating work schedules that would challenge modern labor unions if modern labor unions existed, which they don't, because organizing workers requires workers who are legally considered workers rather than property. The workday length gets determined by daylight availability and overseer enthusiasm rather than employee fatigue or basic human dignity. Food consists of whatever can be produced cheaply in sufficient quantities to maintain worker functionality without reducing plantation profit margins. The nutritional program emphasizes calories over variety, creating meal plans that would impress nutritionists studying the minimum dietary requirements for preventing immediate death while maintaining maximum work capacity. The overseer system provides management supervision using motivational techniques that emphasize immediate punishment for productivity failures and immediate punishment for productivity successes that aren't sufficiently enthusiastic. The supervisory staff receives training in human resource management that focuses on treating human resources as resources rather than humans. Education happens through informal networks that operate despite laws making it illegal to teach enslaved people to read, because apparently literacy enables dangerous activities like reading about places where people aren't owned by other people. The curriculum covers practical subjects like survival, agriculture, and maintaining hope in situations designed to eliminate hope systematically. Your family structure depends on economic decisions made by people who view family relationships as inconvenient emotional complications that interfere with labor allocation efficiency. Children, parents, and spouses can be relocated to different geographic areas based on market conditions, debt settlement requirements, and the owner's opinion about optimal human resource distribution. Medical care involves treatments that emphasize maintaining worker productivity rather than worker comfort, which creates healthcare systems that prioritize preventing death over preventing suffering. The medical philosophy focuses on keeping workers functional rather than healthy, using the same approach applied to maintaining farm equipment and livestock. The transportation system specializes in moving people who don't want to move toward destinations they didn't choose for permanent employment. They didn't accept. The domestic slave trade operates with commercial efficiency that would impress logistics specialists if logistics specialists specialized in human trafficking and family destruction. Sleep happens in housing that emphasizes functional shelter over comfort, privacy, or dignity. The accommodations provide protection from weather, while demonstrating that humans can be housed using the same budget considerations applied to storing agricultural equipment and farm animals. The buildings offer community living experiences that nobody requested but everyone receives. The cotton economy creates working conditions that combine agricultural labor with manufacturing deadlines, producing quotas that must be met regardless of weather, health conditions, or personal opinions about quota reasonableness. The work environment emphasizes efficiency through fear, which creates productivity levels that would impress business consultants studying motivation techniques based on systematic terror. Communication happens through informal networks that carry information about family members who've been sold to distant locations, escape opportunities that probably won't succeed, and news from places where people aren't owned by other people. The information systems operate despite laws prohibiting many forms of communication that might encourage workers to develop unrealistic expectations about personal freedom. The southern climate provides excellent growing conditions for crops and moderately challenging survival conditions for people who work in fields from dawn to dusk, while wearing clothes designed for economy rather than comfort. The heat and humidity create natural challenges that combine with artificial challenges to produce working conditions that would violate multiple international labor standards, if international labor standards existed. Your skills development focuses on agricultural techniques, craft production, and domestic services that increase your economic value to people who own you like they own farm equipment. The training programs emphasize abilities that generate profit for other people rather than personal advancement opportunities or career development that leads to independence. Religious services provide spiritual guidance that emphasizes accepting current conditions while hoping for improvements in the afterlife, which creates theological systems that reconcile divine justice with systematic injustice through promising that justice will be administered later by different management. The church services happen in buildings where some attendees own other attendees, creating worship experiences that would challenge theologians studying the compatibility of Christianity with slavery. The punishment system operates with creativity that would impress people studying institutional cruelty as an art form. Physical discipline gets administered for productivity failures, attitude problems, and occasionally just to maintain general awareness that punishment can happen any time for any reason or no reason. The disciplinary methods demonstrate impressive innovation in techniques for causing pain without reducing work capacity. Your economic value gets calculated using formulas that consider age, health, skills, and market conditions, creating personal worth assessments that fluctuate based on cotton prices and regional demand for human labor. The valuation system treats people like investment portfolios that can appreciate or depreciate based on economic factors beyond their control. The plantation landscape includes beautiful architecture, gardens, and scenery that create environments where aesthetic beauty exists alongside systematic human degradation. The same attention to detail that creates lovely homes and grounds gets applied to maintaining profitable operations that depend on treating humans like capital investments rather than people. Local customs adapt to include traditions that accommodate social systems where some people own other people and consider this arrangement normal, natural, and divinely sanctioned. Cultural practices evolve to emphasize hierarchies that reinforce power relationships between people who own and people who are owned. creating social structures that would fascinate anthropologists studying institutionalized dehumanization. But the sun sets over another day in the land of the free, where freedom has terms and conditions that don't apply equally to everyone. And somewhere across time and geography, another location is preparing to demonstrate that systematic elimination of human beings is a remarkably persistent theme in human affairs, with distinctly 20th century innovations. Part 15. Armenia. During the Armenian Genocide, 1915 to 1917, the southern heat evaporates into Ottoman dust, where the mountains provide beautiful scenery and excellent natural barriers for people trying to escape systematic elimination by the very government that's supposed to protect. You wake up in Anatolia, April 1915, and today the postman is delivering something more serious than bills or letters from relatives. He's delivering deportation orders that suggest your family should pack for a permanent vacation to destinations that don't appear on any tourist maps and probably don't have return transportation available. The Ottoman Empire stretches across terrain that includes mountains, deserts, and administrative districts, where different ethnic groups have lived peacefully for centuries until someone decided that ethnic diversity was a problem requiring final solutions. The geography that once made Armenia a crossroads of civilizations now makes it a crossroads of escape routes that lead to places nobody wants to visit. Your family receives official documentation explaining that you're being relocated for security reasons during wartime, which sounds reasonable until you realize that the security being protected belongs to people who want your family to stop existing, and the relocation involves walking through deserts without adequate food, water, or realistic expectations of survival. The deportation system operates with Ottoman administrative efficiency that would impress logistics coordinators studying methods for moving large populations toward destinations where they won't need return tickets. The organization demonstrates remarkable attention to detail in planning journeys that begin with communities and end with individual graves scattered across uninhabitable terrain. Your daily routine changes from normal family activities to forced marching through landscapes that combine natural beauty with artificial horror. The mountains that once provided homes for Armenian communities now provide scenic backdrops for death marches that would challenge professional hiking enthusiasts who aren't carrying families, elderly relatives, and dwindling food supplies. The Turkish countryside offers excellent opportunities for outdoor activities like dying of thirst while walking through deserts that weren't designed for human habitation, especially by humans who've been stripped of their possessions and forced to travel without proper supplies or realistic destination planning. The terrain provides natural challenges that combine with artificial challenges to create survival scenarios that would challenge professional survivalists with proper equipment and voluntary participation. Food becomes whatever can be foraged along routes that pass through areas where nothing edible grows, and previous travelers have already consumed anything that might have been edible. The meal planning involves calculating how long family members can survive on hope, determination, and the occasional route that might not be poisonous enough to cause immediate death. The escort system provides security services that emphasize protecting the deportees from themselves, particularly from their natural tendency to want to remain alive and return to their homes. The guards demonstrate impressive commitment to ensuring that deportees maintain appropriate walking speeds toward destinations that become increasingly theoretical as the journey progresses. Educational opportunities abound for learning practical skills, like identifying which family members are too weak to continue walking and calculating optimal resource distribution among people who are all slowly dying together. The curriculum covers advanced topics like maintaining hope in hopeless situations and finding water in places where water doesn't exist. Your possessions get redistributed through an economic system that involves leaving everything behind except what you can carry, then gradually discarding what you can carry as walking becomes more difficult and carrying capacity decreases along with physical strength. The luggage requirements emphasize extreme minimalism, taken to levels that would impress people studying voluntary simplicity if the simplicity were voluntary. The transportation infrastructure consists of roads that connect places where Armenians used to live to places where Armenians will stop living, using route planning that emphasizes scenic desert landscapes and mountain passes that provide excellent exercise opportunities for people who are too weak to exercise and too hungry to appreciate scenery. Medical care involves treating conditions that result from systematic deprivation, using healing techniques that emphasize prayer and determination rather than medicine or nutrition. The healthcare system demonstrates impressive adaptation to treating patients suffering from ailments like forced march syndrome, systematic starvation, and government-sponsored elimination disorder. Sleep happens on ground that's too hard for comfort, and in weather that's too cold for survival, creating rest periods that provide excellent practice for permanent rest. The accommodation standards emphasize outdoor experiences that nobody requested, but everyone receives, featuring amenities like rocks for pillows and desert sand for bedding. The Syrian desert provides natural educational opportunities for learning about geography, climate, and the maximum distance humans can walk without food, water, or hope before converting from living people into scattered bones that will puzzle archaeologists in future centuries. The terrain demonstrates impressive hostility to human survival through features like extreme temperatures and complete absence of resources. Your family structure gets restructured through natural selection processes that favor family members who can walk the longest distances on the least nutrition while maintaining optimism about reaching destinations that exist primarily in administrative documents. The demographic changes happen gradually, then suddenly, then permanently. Communication happens through networks that carry news about which family members have stopped walking, and which routes lead to slightly less fatal destinations than other routes. The information systems operate efficiently for sharing practical advice about survival techniques and rumors about places where deportees might find water, food, or merciful death. The Turkish countryside includes local populations who observe deportation columns passing through their communities with expressions that suggest they understand what's happening, but have strong opinions about personal survival that discourage interference with government policies. The residents demonstrate remarkable interest in minding their own business, while other people's business involves systematic elimination. Weather conditions provide seasonal variations that include summer heat, that kills through dehydration, and winter cold, that kills through exposure, creating year-round opportunities for experiencing death through climate-related causes that combine with malnutrition and exhaustion to produce mortality rates that would impress demographers studying population elimination techniques. Your daily walking routine involves covering distances that would challenge healthy people with proper nutrition and equipment, while carrying family members who can't walk and possessions that become increasingly irrelevant as survival priorities shift toward finding water and avoiding immediate death through heat stroke or exhaustion. The escort guards provide motivational support through techniques that emphasize maintaining walking speeds despite decreasing physical capacity, using encouragement methods that include beating people who walk too slowly and shooting people who stop walking entirely. The motivational philosophy focuses on negative reinforcement through immediate physical consequences for performance failures. Local wildlife demonstrates superior survival instincts by avoiding areas where human deportation columns pass through, apparently understanding that humans under these conditions represent ecological disruption that's best observed from safe distances. The animals show more sense than the humans, which is concerning when your survival strategy is being critiqued by desert wildlife. Religious services provide spiritual guidance that emphasizes accepting divine will while questioning why divine will involves systematic elimination of entire populations through bureaucratic efficiency. The theological discussions focus on reconciling faith in divine justice with experiencing injustice that suggests either divine absence or divine indifference to human suffering on industrial scales. The deportation schedule operates with administrative precision that ensures maximum efficiency in moving people from places where they want to stay toward places where they don't want to go and won't survive long enough to complain about the accommodations. The timing demonstrates impressive coordination between different government departments that specialize in population management through elimination. Your childhood education gets supplemented with advanced courses in survival techniques that weren't traditionally part of Armenian cultural education, such as walking until you collapse, sharing insufficient food among too many people, and maintaining family unity, while family members disappear at regular intervals due to natural selection pressures. The mountain passes provide scenic views that would be more impressive if you had the energy to appreciate scenery and weren't too focused on the practical challenges of crossing terrain that's difficult under the best circumstances and impossible under current circumstances. The landscape offers natural beauty that serves as backdrop for unnatural ugliness. But the sun sets over another day in the Ottoman Empire, where administrative efficiency has been applied to problems that probably didn't require such thorough solutions. And somewhere across the ocean of time, another geographic location is preparing to demonstrate that ethnic cleansing is a remarkably adaptable concept that works equally well in European settings with modern technology. Part 16, Bosnia. During the Yugoslav Wars 1992 to 1995, the Ottoman desert dissolves into Balkan mountains, where neighbors who shared coffee yesterday are sharing bullets today, and the scenic valleys echo with the sounds of people discovering that ethnic differences can be resolved through systematic rape, murder, and siege warfare. You open your eyes in Sarajevo, 1993, and the morning alarm clock is the whistle of sniper bullets passing through your bedroom window, because apparently the Serbs have decided that Bosnian independence should be discouraged through creative applications of long-range marksmanship, targeting people who commit the crime of existing while Muslim. The Balkans sit at the crossroads of empires that have been fighting over this territory for centuries, which would be historically interesting if history wasn't currently being written in blood by people who think ethnic cleansing is a reasonable solution to political disagreements. The mountains that once provided natural beauty now provide excellent sniper positions and convenient mass grave locations. Your city has been surrounded by people who used to be neighbors but have recently discovered that neighborliness is less important than ethnic purity. The siege operates with the efficiency of people who've learned medieval siege warfare from textbooks and modern ethnic hatred from television broadcasts that explain why coexistence is impossible and elimination is necessary. Breakfast consists of whatever can be found in a city where food delivery has been replaced by artillery delivery, and the postal service specializes in sending explosive messages that arrive with remarkable precision but terrible timing. The morning meal involves eating whatever hasn't been destroyed by shelling, and whatever can be prepared without attracting sniper attention to your kitchen. The Sarajevo marketplace provides shopping opportunities that combine traditional commerce with modern warfare, creating retail experiences where customers must calculate whether they need groceries badly enough to risk being shot by people who disapprove of Bosnian shopping habits. The vendors demonstrate impressive commitment to customer service by maintaining business hours despite regular mortar attacks. Your neighborhood changes daily as buildings get renovated through artillery bombardment, creating urban redevelopment projects that nobody requested but everyone receives. The architectural modifications emphasize open-air concepts through whole creation techniques that would impress construction workers if construction workers typically use tank shells for renovation projects. Education happens in schools that double as bomb shelters, teaching children important subjects like recognizing different types of incoming artillery by sound and calculating optimal routes to avoid sniper coverage areas. The curriculum includes traditional academics plus newer courses like advanced ducking techniques. The ethnic cleansing system operates with administrative efficiency that would impress people studying systematic population removal techniques that combine modern technology with traditional hatred. The process demonstrates remarkable attention to detail in identifying, separating, and eliminating people based on religious affiliations that weren't particularly important until someone decided they were worth killing over. Medical care involves treating injuries that result from creative applications of military hardware to civilian targets, using medical supplies that must be smuggled through siege lines by people who risk being shot for practicing medicine without proper ethnic credentials. The hospitals serve patients suffering from conditions like arbitrary sniper attack and ethnic cleansing participation disorder. Your daily routine involves calculating safe routes through a city where every street corner might contain people who want to kill you for having the wrong religious background, ethnic heritage, or opinion about Yugoslav political arrangements. The navigation system emphasizes avoiding areas with good sniper visibility and excellent artillery targeting opportunities. The concentration camps operate using organizational techniques that combine World War II administrative methods with modern Balkan ethnic hatred, creating detention facilities that provide accommodation for people whose accommodation qualifications include having the wrong ancestry and living in the wrong geographic locations during the wrong historical period. Communication happens through networks that carry news about which neighborhoods have been eliminated, through systematic house-to-house killing, and which family members have been selected for participation in ethnic cleansing activities that don't involve returning home to discuss their experiences. The information systems work efficiently for coordinating survival strategies and memorial services. Sleep occurs during brief intervals between artillery barrages, in basements that provide protection from shelling but not from the knowledge that people are being systematically murdered in nearby locations for having different religious beliefs or ethnic backgrounds. The night sounds include gunfire, explosions, and crying from families whose members have been recruited for involuntary participation in genocide. The transportation system adapts to provide services that connect communities where people used to live peacefully to locations where they can be processed efficiently through systematic elimination procedures. The buses and trains operate with schedule modifications that emphasize one-way travel to destinations that don't typically send postcards. Food distribution follows supply chain management principles that involve stealing food from people who need it and redistributing it to people who are eliminating the people who need it. The rationing system operates with mathematical precision that ensures maximum suffering for target populations while maintaining adequate nutrition for people conducting the elimination activities. Your family structure gets reorganized through selection processes that separate family members based on gender, age, and potential usefulness for activities that range from forced labor to systematic rape to immediate execution. The demographic reorganization happens with efficiency that would impress human resource specialists studying population management through elimination. The rape camps operate as systematic sexual violence facilities that demonstrate impressive organizational commitment to using rape as a weapon of war and ethnic cleansing tool. The facilities provide services that combine traditional military detention with innovative approaches to psychological warfare that target women and communities through sexual violence programs. Local customs evolve to include new traditions like community identification of ethnic enemies and group participation in activities that involve eliminating neighbors who practice different religions or speak different languages. Cultural practices adapt to emphasize skills that promote survival in environments where survival depends on having the correct ethnic credentials. The international community watches with the engaged interest of people observing a nature documentary about predators eliminating prey, providing humanitarian assistance that consists of strongly worded statements and peacekeeping forces that aren't authorized to keep peace through any methods that might actually keep peace. Weather conditions provide seasonal variations that include winter cold that makes outdoor mass execution activities less comfortable for the executioners, and summer heat that accelerates decomposition of people who've been executed, creating natural challenges that combine with artificial challenges to produce environmental conditions that would concern public health officials if public health officials were allowed to practice public health. Your childhood entertainment involves games that reflect current events, such as avoid the ethnic cleansers and identify which neighbors are planning to kill you. The recreational activities focus on developing skills that promote longevity in environments where longevity depends on recognizing threats that come from people who used to be friends. The Yugoslav military demonstrates impressive creativity in applying modern military technology to ancient ethnic hatred, creating warfare techniques that combine precision weapons with imprecise targeting based on religious and ethnic criteria. The military operations emphasize efficiency and population elimination rather than traditional military objectives like territorial control. Religious institutions provide spiritual guidance that attempts to reconcile divine love with systematic hatred, creating theological challenges that involve explaining why God permits ethnic cleansing while encouraging forgiveness for people who are actively conducting genocide. The churches serve congregations that are being systematically eliminated by other congregations who worship the same God using different rituals. But another day ends in the former Yugoslavia, where the former part is permanent, and the Yugoslavia part is being redefined through systematic murder, and somewhere across the world, another geographic location is preparing to demonstrate that suffering comes in flavors that include Central Asian variations with distinctly Soviet-influenced characteristics. Part 17. Afghanistan. During the Soviet invasion and Taliban rule, 1979 to 2001, the Balkan gunfire fades into the sound of Soviet helicopters, where the mountains echo with weapons that were designed for World War III, but are being field-tested on people whose main crime was living on top of geographic real estate that superpowers find strategically interesting. You wake up in Kabul, 1985, and the morning soundtrack includes the distinctive rotor chop of Hind gunships circling overhead, like mechanical vultures hunting for mujahideen who've committed the offense of objecting to Soviet improvements to Afghan political arrangements through occupation, puppet governments, and creative applications of military hardware to civilian population centers. Afghanistan sits at the crossroads of empires that have been attempting to conquer it for centuries, earning the nickname Graveyard of Empires through consistent success at converting foreign armies into archaeological evidence. The terrain includes mountains that provide excellent hiding places for resistance fighters and natural barriers that make conventional military operations about as effective as trying to arrest fog. Your neighborhood changes hands between Soviet forces, mujahideen groups, and warlords with the frequency of seasons, creating political stability that resembles a game of musical chairs played with automatic weapons and rocket-propelled grenades. The government controls the major cities during daylight hours and loses control of everything else during nighttime hours, creating a political system that operates on a part-time schedule. The Soviet occupation demonstrates impressive commitment to spreading communist ideology through methods that involve bombing villages, mining agricultural areas, and eliminating people who express insufficient enthusiasm for Marxist-Leninist principles. The ideological education program emphasizes learning through direct experience with systematic destruction of traditional social structures. Food becomes whatever can be grown in fields that haven't been mined, harvested by people who haven't been killed, and transported through areas that aren't currently experiencing active combat operations. The agricultural system operates with reduced efficiency due to explosive devices scattered throughout farming areas, and farmers who've been recruited for alternative employment in resistance activities. Your daily routine involves calculating safe routes through a city where every building might contain Soviet soldiers, mujahideen fighters, or people who aren't sure which side they're supposed to support today. The navigation system emphasizes avoiding areas with good sniper positions, recent bombing damage, and mines that were placed by people who forgot to mark their locations on maps. Education happens in schools that teach traditional subjects when teachers are available. The curriculum includes religious studies, mathematics, and practical courses like identifying different types of military aircraft by sound and basic mine avoidance techniques for daily walking. The Mujahideen resistance operates using guerrilla warfare tactics that would impress military strategists studying asymmetric conflict between superpowers and people who are highly motivated by foreign armies occupying their homeland. The fighters demonstrate impressive creativity in converting agricultural tools and household items into weapon systems that challenge professional military equipment. Medical care involves treating injuries that result from modern warfare conducted in medieval conditions, using medical supplies that must be smuggled through military checkpoints by people who risk being shot for practicing medicine without proper political credentials. The hospitals serve patients suffering from conditions like stepped-on landmine and caught in crossfire between competing liberation movements. Sleep occurs during intervals between bombing raids, artillery barrages and firefights that happen when different armed groups encounter each other, while trying to avoid other armed groups. The night sounds include explosions, gunfire, and the drone of aircraft conducting reconnaissance missions that usually end with something being bombed. The Afghan mountains provide excellent natural fortifications for resistance fighters, and equally excellent challenges for conventional armies trying to control territory that includes peaks, valleys, and cave systems that weren't designed for modern military operations. The terrain offers unlimited opportunities for ambush, retreat, and regrouping for people who understand mountain warfare better than their opponents. Transportation involves traveling on roads that may contain mines, checkpoints operated by people with conflicting political opinions, and bridges that might be destroyed by military operations while you're crossing them. The journey planning emphasizes flexibility and backup routes for backup routes, because primary routes have a tendency to become temporarily or permanently impassable. The Taliban emerges from refugee camps and religious schools, bringing order through systematic elimination of activities they consider un-Islamic, which includes most activities that involve women, music, education, or expressions of joy. Their governance model emphasizes religious purity through public executions, amputations, and stoning ceremonies that serve as community entertainment and political education. Your family adapts to living under successive occupying forces that have different political objectives, but similar approaches to maintaining control through fear, violence, and systematic destruction of opposition. Everyone develops survival skills like recognizing different military uniforms, identifying safe places to hide during combat operations, and maintaining appropriate expressions of political neutrality. Women discover that their educational and employment opportunities have been revised to include staying at home wearing burqas and avoiding activities that might demonstrate independence, intelligence, or capability. The career development programs for women emphasize traditional roles that don't require leaving the house, speaking in public, or existing visibly in society. Communication happens through networks that carry information about military movements, safe routes, and news from family members who may have joined resistance groups, fled to refugee camps, or been eliminated during security operations. The information systems operate despite restrictions on communication devices and people who monitor conversations for politically incorrect content. The poppy cultivation industry experiences unprecedented growth as farmers discover that opium production provides better income than traditional crops and operates through distribution networks that remain functional despite political instability. The agricultural economics demonstrate impressive adaptation to market conditions that favor crops with high value and ready buyers. Local customs evolve to accommodate successive waves of foreign occupiers and domestic authoritarians who have different cultural requirements, but similar enthusiasm for using violence to enforce cultural compliance. Traditional practices adapt to emphasize survival techniques that weren't traditionally part of Afghan culture, such as appearing invisible to authorities and developing appropriate responses to religious police. The weather provides seasonal challenges that include winter snow that makes military operations more difficult for everyone, and summer heat that makes wearing burqas uncomfortable for women who are required to wear burqas regardless of weather conditions. The climate remains consistently challenging for people trying to survive while living under political systems that consider survival a privilege rather than a right. Religious education becomes mandatory under the Taliban, covering important subjects like proper beard length for men, appropriate invisibility techniques for women, and correct responses to moral authorities who enforce religious compliance through public beatings. The theological curriculum emphasizes obedience through fear rather than understanding through education. Your childhood involves learning skills that combine traditional Afghan culture with modern survival techniques, such as identifying different types of military equipment, recognizing religious police from safe distances, and maintaining family unity while family members disappear into resistance movements, refugee camps, or mass graves. But the sun sets over another day in the land that has defeated every empire that tried to conquer it, though the definition of victory becomes increasingly unclear when the prize for winning is continued suffering. and somewhere across distant waters, another corner of the world is preparing to demonstrate that societal collapse can happen gradually, then suddenly, then completely. Part 18, Somalia, during state collapse and famine, 1990 CES present. The Afghan mountains crumble into Somali sand, where the government has stopped existing but the problems have multiplied, creating a natural experiment in what happens when a country decides to stop being a country, while the people living there continue needing government services. You open your eyes in Mogadishu, 1993, and the morning begins with the distinctive sound of clan militias negotiating territorial disputes through rocket-propelled grenade diplomacy, because apparently traditional conflict resolution has been replaced with weapon systems that were designed for tank warfare, but work surprisingly well on civilian buildings. Somalia sits on the Horn of Africa like a geographic question mark, which is appropriate since nobody seems to know who's in charge, where the borders are, or whether the country still exists as anything more than a geographic expression that appears on maps produced by cartographers with optimistic attitudes about political stability. Your neighborhood belongs to whichever warlord controls it this week, creating property ownership systems that emphasize military strength over legal documentation. The real estate market operates on principles that would confuse property lawyers, assuming property lawyers existed and weren't too busy fleeing to neighboring countries to practice property law. The central government has achieved the impressive feat of disappearing completely while leaving behind all the problems that governments are supposed to solve, such as maintaining order, providing services, and preventing society from turning into a Mad Max movie with worse catering and more ambitious pirates. Food arrives through humanitarian aid programs that must negotiate safe passage with armed groups who've developed creative taxation systems for relief convoys. The supply chain management involves calculating how much food aid will reach hungry people versus how much will be redirected toward feeding militia members who control the distribution infrastructure through superior firepower. Your daily routine involves avoiding areas where different clan militias are settling business disputes through methods that include mortars, machine guns, and occasionally just beating each other with sticks when ammunition runs low. The conflict resolution system emphasizes immediate satisfaction over long-term stability, creating legal precedents that would challenge international law experts if international law applied to places where law enforcement has been privatized through militia ownership. Education happens in schools that operate when teachers are available. Buildings haven't been destroyed by fighting, and students can travel safely through areas controlled by armed groups who may or may not approve of education for children whose clan affiliations might be politically incorrect. The curriculum covers traditional subjects plus newer courses like practical militia identification and advanced route planning around combat zones. The piracy industry experiences unprecedented growth as entrepreneurs discover that hijacking ships provides better income than traditional fishing, especially since traditional fishing has been disrupted by foreign vessels dumping toxic waste in Somali waters. The maritime business demonstrates impressive innovation in combining traditional boat handling skills with modern ransom negotiation techniques. Medical care involves treating patients suffering from conditions that result from living in a country where the main industries are warfare, piracy, and humanitarian aid distribution. The hospitals operate with supplies that arrive sporadically and staff who risk being kidnapped by groups that need medical professionals for treating wounded militia members. Transportation involves traveling through territories controlled by different armed groups who operate checkpoint systems that combine traditional taxation with modern extortion techniques. The journey planning emphasizes carrying appropriate bribes for various militia leaders and calculating optimal routes that minimize exposure to crossfire between competing warlords. Your family structure adapts to conditions where clan loyalty becomes more important than national citizenship, creating social systems that emphasize tribal connections over legal relationships. Everyone develops genealogical knowledge that would impress professional historians, because knowing your clan heritage determines whether armed strangers will protect you or shoot you. The drought cycles combine with human conflicts to create famine conditions that would challenge disaster relief experts under the best circumstances, which Somalia definitely doesn't provide. The agricultural system operates with reduced efficiency due to farmers who've been recruited for militia service and fields that double as battlegrounds for territorial disputes. Sleep happens during intervals between firefights, punctuated by night sounds that include gunfire, explosions, and the rumble of vehicles transporting armed groups who are either defending your neighborhood or attacking it, depending on their current clan affiliations and business objectives. Communication networks carry information about which areas are safe for travel, which warlords are currently allied with which other warlords, and which humanitarian organizations are still operating despite security conditions that would challenge professional mercenaries. The information systems work efficiently for coordinating survival strategies and clan politics. The international community provides assistance that includes peacekeeping missions, but aren't authorized to keep peace through any methods that might actually work, humanitarian aid that gets redistributed through militia-controlled supply chains, and diplomatic efforts that involve recognizing governments that don't control anything beyond the buildings where they hold meetings. Local customs evolve to accommodate social systems where traditional clan structures provide more security than modern state institutions, creating governance through kinship networks and dispute resolution through elder councils that mediate conflicts using traditional methods supplemented by modern weapons when traditional methods prove insufficient. The coastal waters provide excellent opportunities for maritime entrepreneurship through activities that combine traditional boat operation with modern cargo appropriation techniques. The fishing industry adapts to specialize in catching ships rather than fish, creating economic opportunities that appeal to young men whose alternative employment options include militia service or unemployment. Weather patterns include seasonal droughts that create famine conditions, seasonal rains that create flooding, and year-round heat that makes outdoor survival challenging under the best circumstances, which never occur in Somalia during this period. The climate provides consistent challenges that combine with human-created challenges to produce living conditions that would concern humanitarian organizations if humanitarian organizations could operate safely. Your childhood involves learning survival skills that combine traditional Somali culture with modern warfare adaptation techniques, such as recognizing different types of weapons by sound, identifying clan symbols and militia uniforms, and maintaining family connections across territories controlled by groups that might be hostile to your clan affiliation. The economic system operates on principles that emphasize immediate resource acquisition over long-term development, creating markets where the primary currencies are ammunition, food aid, and livestock that can be moved quickly when territorial control changes hands. Consumer goods consist of whatever can be imported through ports controlled by armed groups or stolen from humanitarian shipments. Urban planning becomes completely theoretical as cities develop through organic growth patterns that emphasize defensive positions and quick escape routes rather than infrastructure development or public services. The architecture focuses on practical concerns like bulletproof walls and fortified compounds, rather than aesthetic considerations or building codes. Religious institutions provide spiritual guidance and social services in the absence of government institutions, operating schools, hospitals, and mediation services while trying to maintain religious authority in environments where secular authority comes from, whoever has the most weapons and the willingness to use them immediately. But the sun sets over another day in the failed state that demonstrates what happens when countries stop working while people continue needing countries to work. And somewhere across the continent, another geographic location is preparing to show that government-engineered disaster can be just as effective as natural disaster for creating massive human suffering. Part 19. Vietnam. During the Vietnam War, 1955 to 1975, the Somali sand transforms into Vietnamese jungle, where the trees provide excellent cover for people trying to kill each other, and the humidity makes everything stick together, including napalm to human skin, in ways that chemistry textbooks probably didn't intend. You wake up in a village near the Mekong Delta, 1968, and breakfast gets interrupted by helicopters that arrive without invitation and leave without apologies, carrying passengers who consider your village strategically important for reasons that involve maps drawn by people who've never visited Vietnam and military objectives that seem to change based on political weather in Washington. The Vietnamese landscape includes rice paddies that provide excellent food production and equally excellent hiding places for people who disagree with American foreign policy. The jungle canopy offers natural camouflage for activities that range from traditional agriculture to modern guerrilla warfare, creating an environment where farmers and fighters become interchangeable depending on what time of day the helicopters arrive. Your family's agricultural schedule gets disrupted by defoliation programs that eliminate jungle cover through chemical applications that also eliminate crops, livestock, and occasionally people who are standing too close to areas that needed defoliation. Agent Orange provides long-term environmental benefits that include cancer, birth defects, and soil contamination that creates agricultural challenges for several generations. The tunnel systems beneath your village demonstrate impressive engineering skills applied to the problem of surviving American attempts to locate and eliminate Vietnamese people who object to American military presence. The underground network provides transportation, storage, and housing for people whose housing preferences emphasize survival over comfort or adequate ventilation. The monsoon season combines traditional flooding with modern warfare to create survival challenges that would impress adventure sports enthusiasts. If adventure sports enthusiasts enjoyed activities that involved dodging napalm strikes while wading through flooded rice fields that may contain booby traps, unexploded ordnance, or American soldiers who consider anything moving a legitimate target. Your education happens in schools that operate when teachers haven't been recruited for resistance activities and buildings haven't been destroyed by strategic bombing campaigns. The curriculum covers traditional Vietnamese subjects, plus newer courses like identifying different types of military aircraft by engine sound and basic unexploded ordnance recognition for daily walking. Food production involves growing rice in fields that double as battlegrounds, using agricultural techniques that must accommodate mines, artillery craters, and chemical contamination that makes crops glow with interesting colors that weren't traditionally part of Vietnamese cuisine. The farming equipment gets supplemented with metal detectors and protective gear that would be more appropriate for hazmat work than agriculture. The Mekong River provides transportation for boats carrying supplies to villages and boats carrying soldiers to eliminate villages, creating river traffic that resembles a very deadly version of rush hour where the wrong turn leads to machine gun fire rather than traffic delays. The waterways serve multiple functions including commerce, transportation, and body disposal, which creates conflicts between traditional river usage and modern military requirements. Medical care involves treating injuries that result from weapons designed for conventional warfare being used in unconventional ways on people who weren't expecting to participate in warfare at all. The village healers adapt traditional medicine to address conditions like napalm burns, shrapnel removal, and psychological trauma from watching helicopters machine gun water buffalo. Your family develops survival strategies that combine traditional Vietnamese culture with modern military awareness, such as recognizing the difference between incoming and outgoing artillery by sound, identifying safe hiding places during bombing raids, and maintaining rice cultivation schedules that work around military operations conducted by various armed groups with conflicting objectives. The Ho Chi Minh Trail demonstrates impressive logistics coordination for moving supplies through terrain that includes mountains, jungles, and bombing campaigns conducted by people who really want to interrupt supply movements. The transportation network operates with efficiency that would impress professional smugglers, using routes that change daily based on bomb damage and American reconnaissance activities. Sleep happens in underground bunkers that provide protection from bombing raids, but not from the claustrophobia, humidity, and constant fear that comes with living like moles while surface dwellers drop explosives on your ceiling. The night sounds include aircraft engines, distant explosions, and the scurrying of people moving supplies through darkness while avoiding detection by thermal sensors. Communication networks carry information about military movements, safe travel routes, and news from family members who may have joined resistance groups, fled to cities, or been eliminated during security operations. The information systems operate through methods that include coded messages, runner networks, and jungle drums that compete with helicopter noise for auditory clarity. The American strategy demonstrates impressive commitment to winning hearts and minds through methods that involve burning villages to save them, eliminating people to protect them, and destroying the country to preserve it. The military philosophy emphasizes body counts over territory control, creating accounting systems that measure success through mortality statistics rather than political objectives. Your childhood games adapt to reflect current events, such as hide from the helicopters and identify the booby trap, with traditional Vietnamese children's activities supplemented by survival skills that weren't traditionally part of childhood education, such as recognizing different types of explosives and calculating safe distances from things that might explode. The jungle environment provides excellent conditions for guerrilla warfare and terrible conditions for conventional military operations, creating natural advantages for people who understand jungle survival and natural disadvantages for people whose military training emphasized tank warfare in European terrain. The vegetation offers camouflage opportunities that would impress professional hunters if professional hunters used automatic weapons and rocket launchers. Local customs evolved to include new traditions like community bomb shelter construction and group prayers for protection from people who consider prayer meetings evidence of enemy coordination. Cultural practices adapt to emphasize skills that weren't traditionally part of Vietnamese society, such as recognizing different military uniforms and developing appropriate responses to soldiers who ask questions in languages you don't understand. The economic system operates through black market networks that provide goods and services not available through official channels that have been disrupted by warfare, military occupation, and economic policies designed by people who learned Vietnamese economics from military advisors rather than Vietnamese economists. Consumer goods arrive through supply chains that emphasize avoiding military checkpoints over traditional commercial efficiency. But the sun sets over another day in Southeast Asia, where the domino theory is being tested through applications of military force that would challenge domino enthusiasts. And somewhere across the Pacific, another geographic location is preparing to demonstrate that economic collapse can be just as destructive as military conflict and significantly more embarrassing for economists. Part 20, Zimbabwe, during economic collapse. 2000s. The Vietnamese jungle dissolves into African savanna, where the economy has achieved hyperinflation rates that would impress mathematicians if mathematicians could afford calculators in a country where calculators cost more than houses, and houses cost more than the entire gross domestic product of neighboring countries. You open your eyes in Hara 2008, and today's exchange rate requires carrying money in wheelbarrows to buy bread, assuming bread exists, and accepting that the wheelbarrow is probably worth more than the money it contains. Zimbabwe has achieved the impressive economic milestone of making money literally worthless, while maintaining government services that are figuratively worthless. The Zimbabwean dollar experiences inflation rates that require scientific notation to express accurately, creating mathematical challenges for people trying to calculate how much money they need to buy lunch versus how much money exists in the entire country. The currency becomes more valuable as wallpaper than as legal tender, which solves interior decorating problems while creating everything problems. Your morning routine involves checking today's inflation rate, which changes hourly and occasionally achieves percentage increases that would require new mathematical symbols to express properly. The prices for basic commodities like bread, milk, and fuel increase faster than you can count the money needed to purchase them, creating shopping experiences that resemble very expensive auctions where everyone loses. The Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe demonstrates impressive creativity in currency design, printing banknotes with numbers that grow from millions to billions to trillions, eventually reaching denominations that would challenge astronomers studying large numbers in space. The printing presses work overtime, producing money that becomes worthless before the ink dries, creating employment for people whose job involves manufacturing economic disaster. Food becomes available only to people who possess foreign currency, gold, or skills that can be bartered for nutrition. The supermarket shelves stand empty like museum displays of what grocery stores looked like before the economy achieved complete mathematical impossibility. The few items available for purchase require carrying suitcases full of banknotes that weigh more than the groceries they might purchase. Your daily shopping experience involves visiting multiple banks to withdraw the maximum daily limit, which buys approximately one loaf of bread if you're lucky, and half a loaf if inflation accelerated while you were standing in the withdrawal queue. The banking system operates with computers that can't calculate numbers large enough to handle current exchange rates, creating technological challenges that would impress computer engineers studying mathematical overflow errors. The agricultural sector demonstrates remarkable efficiency in producing crops that can't be sold profitably because the cost of fertilizer increases faster than crop prices, while the cost of fuel for transportation increases faster than anyone can calculate. The farmers develop innovative business models that involve growing food for barter rather than sale, creating agricultural economies that haven't been seen since medieval times. Education happens in schools that operate when teachers can afford transportation to work, and when parents can afford school fees that increase daily, while their salaries remain constant. The curriculum includes traditional subjects plus newer courses like advanced hyperinflation mathematics and practical barter techniques for daily survival. Your employment provides salary payments that become worthless between the time you earn them and the time you spend them, creating career opportunities that emphasize immediate consumption over savings plans. The payroll system operates with calculators that can't handle the number of zeros required for current wage calculations, forcing employers to pay salaries in scientific notation or foreign currency. Medical care involves hospitals that operate when they can afford electricity, medicine, and staff who haven't emigrated to countries where their salaries buy more than a single aspirin tablet. The healthcare system provides treatment using equipment that can't be maintained because replacement parts cost more than the entire hospital budget, creating medical care that emphasizes prayer over technology. Transportation involves vehicles that run when fuel is available, and when the cost of fuel hasn't increased beyond the entire value of the vehicle since yesterday. The public transportation system operates on schedules that depend more on fuel availability than time considerations, creating commuting experiences that emphasize walking over mechanical transportation. The Zimbabwe Stock Exchange achieves record-breaking performance through stock prices that increase by thousands of % daily, while representing companies that are worth less in real terms than they were before the record-breaking performance began. The investment opportunities would excite speculators if the speculation involved real money, rather than mathematical abstractions that change value faster than computers can calculate. Your family develops financial strategies that emphasize spending money immediately after receiving it, because waiting until tomorrow means the money will buy half as much, and waiting until next week means the money will buy nothing at all. The household budgeting involves calculations that require advanced mathematics to express inflation rates and simple arithmetic to realize that the numbers don't work under any circumstances. Communication networks carry information about which shops have received new merchandise, which banks have cash available for withdrawal, and which borders remain open for people seeking economic opportunities in neighboring countries, where money retains some connection to actual value. The information systems operate efficiently for coordinating survival strategies and emigration planning. The government provides explanations for economic conditions that blame external factors, internal sabotage, and international conspiracies for problems that apparently have nothing to do with printing money faster than economically advisable. The official statements demonstrate impressive creativity in avoiding responsibility for economic policies that achieve mathematical impossibilities through administrative determination. Sleep happens in houses that are worth millions of dollars on paper, and nothing whatsoever in practical terms, creating real estate markets, where property values exist only in theoretical calculations that involve currencies that don't function. The night sounds include the rumble of printing presses working overtime, and the conversations of neighbors discussing emigration plans and barter arrangements. Local customs evolve to include new traditions like daily price checking, community bartering networks, and group discussions about which foreign currencies provide the most stable store of value for people whose domestic currency has achieved complete separation from economic reality. Cultural practices adapt to emphasize skills that weren't traditionally part of Zimbabwean education, such as foreign exchange calculation and identifying which neighboring countries accept economic refugees. The tourism industry adapts to accommodate visitors who arrive as millionaires and leave as billionaires through currency conversion processes that involve no actual increase in purchasing power. The foreign exchange markets operate with rates that change hourly and require multilingual skills to express adequately in languages that have words for numbers this large. But the sun sets over another day in Zimbabwe, where sunset provides the only reliable daily event that isn't subject to hyperinflation, and somewhere across the desert, another geographic location is preparing to demonstrate that systematic elimination of people based on ethnic criteria remains a remarkably persistent solution to problems that probably don't require elimination-based solutions. Part 21. Sudan. During the Darfur Genocide, 2003, ongoing. The Zimbabwean inflation dissolves into Saharan heat, where the desert provides excellent conditions for making people disappear permanently, while the international community provides excellent examples of how to express concern without taking action that might actually concern the people conducting the genocide. You wake up in a Darfur village, 2004, and the morning routine includes checking whether your village still exists or has been converted to ash and bones by Janjaweed militias who've received government contracts for ethnic cleansing services. The landscape provides natural beauty that serves as backdrop for unnatural ugliness that would challenge war crimes prosecutors if war crimes prosecutors had jurisdiction over places where international law is considered foreign propaganda. The Sahara Desert creates perfect conditions for systematic elimination activities because the terrain makes escape difficult, evidence disposal easy, and international monitoring nearly impossible. The sand dunes shift constantly, which provides excellent natural burial grounds that rearrange themselves seasonally, creating crime scene management that requires no additional labor costs. Your family belongs to ethnic groups that have been designated for elimination through administrative processes that combine traditional tribal conflicts with modern bureaucratic efficiency. The classification system operates with precision that would impress census takers if census takers specialized in identifying people who need to stop existing rather than people who need to be counted. The Janjaweed militias arrive on horseback and camelback, with weapons provided by people who maintain official ignorance about how those weapons are being used for activities that definitely aren't traditional pastoral activities. The riders demonstrate impressive coordination in conducting village elimination operations that combine traditional nomadic mobility with modern ethnic cleansing techniques. Food production gets disrupted by security operations that involve burning villages, poisoning wells, and eliminating farmers who might otherwise grow crops that could feed people who aren't supposed to continue eating. The agricultural system operates with reduced efficiency due to farmers who've been recruited for involuntary participation in elimination activities. Your daily routine involves calculating optimal hiding places during militia raids, identifying safe water sources that haven't been contaminated intentionally, and maintaining hope despite living in conditions designed by people who've decided your continued existence represents a problem requiring immediate solutions. The survival planning emphasizes short-term thinking because long-term planning assumes you'll survive long enough for long-term plans to matter. Education happens in schools that operate when teachers haven't fled to refugee camps and buildings haven't been destroyed by people who consider education counterproductive to ethnic cleansing objectives. The curriculum covers traditional subjects plus newer courses like advanced hiding techniques and identifying safe routes to nowhere in particular. The refugee camps provide accommodation for people whose accommodation qualifications include having their villages eliminated and their families scattered across geographic areas that may or may not be controlled by people who approve of their continued breathing. The camps offer community living experiences that nobody requested but everyone receives, featuring amenities like insufficient food and inadequate medical care. Medical care involves treating injuries that result from systematic violence conducted by people who've received training in ethnic elimination techniques, from authorities who maintain official ignorance about training programs that definitely don't exist. The healthcare workers provide treatment for conditions like ethnic persecution syndrome and systematic displacement disorder, using medical supplies that arrive sporadically through humanitarian organizations. Transportation involves traveling through territories controlled by armed groups who operate vehicle inspection programs that emphasize identifying passengers who belong to ethnic categories that require immediate processing through elimination procedures. The journey planning includes calculating optimal routes that avoid checkpoints operated by people who consider your ethnic background personally offensive. The water supply gets managed through techniques that involve poisoning wells, destroying pumps, and eliminating people who might otherwise maintain water systems that support communities targeted for elimination. The hydrology operates with reduced functionality due to infrastructure damage and maintenance workers who've been recruited for alternative employment in elimination activities. Sleep happens in temporary shelters that provide protection from weather, but not from night raids, conducted by people who prefer conducting elimination activities during hours when international observers are sleeping. The night sounds include hoofbeats, gunfire, and crying from families whose members have been selected for participation in activities that don't involve returning home. Communication networks carry information about militia movements, safe travel routes, and news from family members who may have reached refugee camps, fled to neighboring countries, or been eliminated during ethnic cleansing operations. The information systems operate through methods that avoid detection by authorities who monitor communications for evidence of resistance activities. The government provides explanations for security operations that emphasize protecting citizens from bandits, terrorists, and other threats that apparently include ethnic minorities who represent security challenges requiring military solutions. The official statements demonstrate impressive creativity in describing elimination activities as security measures and ethnic cleansing as counter-terrorism operations. Your family structure gets reorganized through selection processes that separate family members based on immediate usefulness for forced labor versus immediate eligibility for elimination procedures. The demographic changes happen through systematic processes that would impress population management specialists, studying efficient techniques for reducing specific ethnic populations. The international community demonstrates remarkable consistency in expressing concern about humanitarian situations while avoiding actions that might actually address humanitarian situations through methods more effective than strongly worded statements and fact-finding missions. The diplomatic responses emphasize maintaining international stability through avoiding military interventions that might destabilize international stability. Local customs evolve to include new traditions like community early warning systems for militia approaches and group strategies for protecting children, elderly, and anyone else who might survive elimination activities through hiding, fleeing, or demonstrating sufficient usefulness to avoid immediate processing. Cultural practices adapt to emphasize survival skills that weren't traditionally part of Darfuri education. The desert environment provides natural challenges that include extreme temperatures, water scarcity, and sandstorms that would be difficult under normal circumstances and become impossible when combined with systematic persecution by people who control water sources, food supplies, and territorial access. The climate remains consistently hostile to human survival, regardless of political circumstances. Your childhood involves learning skills that combine traditional Darfuri culture with modern survival techniques, such as recognizing different types of military vehicles by sound, identifying safe hiding places during raids, and maintaining cultural identity while living as refugees in camps that may become permanent communities for people who can't return to villages that no longer exist. The Chad border provides theoretical escape routes for people who can travel across desert terrain while avoiding militia patrols, government checkpoints, and international boundaries that may or may not remain open depending on regional political considerations. Chad's current opinion about accepting refugees from neighboring ethnic cleansing operations. But the sun sets over another day in Darfur, where the sunset reflects off sand that's been stained with blood from people whose main crime was belonging to ethnic groups that someone decided were incompatible with regional development plans. And somewhere across the Mediterranean, another location is preparing to demonstrate that persecution can be conducted with impressive efficiency even when surrounded by countries that officially disapprove of persecution. Part 22. The Atlantic Slave Trade West Africa, 1500s to 1800s. The Syrian bombardment fades into West African heat, where European ships arrive at coastal ports to participate in triangular trade that involves exchanging manufactured goods for human beings who will be shipped across oceans to provide unpaid labor for agricultural operations in distant continents. You wake up in a West African village, 1750, and today brings visitors who've traveled across oceans to participate in commercial activities that involve purchasing people like livestock and transporting them to places where they'll work until they die, while generating profits for people who consider human ownership a reasonable business model. The West African coast provides excellent natural harbors for ships that specialize in human cargo transportation, creating geographic advantages for maritime commerce that would be impressive if the commerce involved traditional goods rather than people who are being converted from free individuals to commercial property through innovative legal arrangements. Your village sits inland from trading posts where local merchants conduct business with European customers who've developed strong demand for human labor that can be owned permanently rather than hired temporarily. The commercial relationships demonstrate impressive international cooperation in activities that would challenge modern human rights lawyers if modern human rights lawyers existed and had jurisdiction over international commerce. The morning routine includes agricultural work, craft production, and community activities that emphasize traditional West African culture, which creates valuable skills that will be useful for people who plan to purchase your labor capacity, along with your physical person for transportation to agricultural operations in distant continents. Family relationships operate according to traditional kinship systems that emphasize community bonds, shared responsibilities, and cultural continuity, which will be permanently disrupted when family members get selected for participation in commercial transactions that don't include return shipping arrangements or family reunification programs. The slave raids demonstrate impressive military coordination between European weapons suppliers and African entrepreneurs who've discovered that capturing people provides better profit margins than traditional commerce in gold, ivory, or agricultural products. The business model operates with efficiency that would impress modern management consultants studying supply chain optimization for human resources. Your daily activities include farming, crafts, and community responsibilities that develop skills valuable for plantation agriculture, domestic service, and manual labor, creating educational opportunities that prepare you for employment positions you didn't apply for in locations you've never heard of, under working conditions that violate several principles of fair employment practices. The trading posts operate with commercial efficiency that would impress international business specialists studying markets, where the primary commodity consists of people who are being converted from community members to export products through legal processes that redefine human beings, agricultural equipment with reproductive capabilities. Food production involves traditional West African agriculture that creates nutritional knowledge useful for surviving ocean voyages on ships designed to maximize human cargo capacity rather than passenger comfort, followed by plantation work that emphasizes productivity over worker health, safety, or survival rates. The capture process involves military operations conducted by neighboring groups who've developed economic incentives for converting traditional tribal conflicts into commercial opportunities that provide prisoners who can be sold to European merchants, rather than integrated into traditional conflict resolution systems that didn't previously involve permanent exile and lifetime enslavement. Education happens through traditional cultural transmission that includes languages, religious practices, and social customs that will be systematically eliminated during transportation and plantation orientation programs designed to convert culturally integrated individuals into culturally isolated workers whose cultural knowledge becomes irrelevant to their new employment circumstances. Your community includes extended family networks, cultural institutions, and social relationships that provide identity, security, and meaning, which will be permanently severed when commercial transactions relocate individuals to geographic locations where community reconstruction becomes impossible due to language barriers, cultural mixing, and legal systems that prohibit social organization among enslaved populations. The coastal factories demonstrate impressive architecture designed for human storage, featuring facilities that combine commercial warehouses with prison systems to accommodate people who are being held temporarily while awaiting transportation to permanent employment in overseas agricultural operations. The buildings emphasize security over comfort, because comfort isn't relevant for cargo that happens to be alive. Medical examinations involve health assessments that evaluate physical capacity for manual labor, reproductive potential, and survival probability during ocean transportation, using medical knowledge to optimize commercial value rather than individual health outcomes. The healthcare system emphasizes maintaining merchandise quality rather than patient welfare. Transportation to coastal areas involves forced marches that would challenge adventure tourists under the best circumstances, which these definitely aren't, featuring routes that connect inland capture areas to coastal shipping facilities through terrain that includes forests, rivers, and geographic obstacles that make escape difficult and pursuit easy. The branding process involves marking human property with symbols that indicate ownership, creating identification systems that would impress logistics specialists studying inventory management for merchandise that might attempt to escape, change identity, or otherwise complicate commercial tracking procedures. Your religious practices include traditional West African spiritual systems, provide community identity and personal meaning, which will be systematically replaced with Christianity that emphasizes obedience, acceptance of suffering, and salvation through submission to authority figures who own your physical person and consider your spiritual development their property as well. The barracoons provide temporary accommodation that combines warehouse storage with prison security, featuring housing that emphasizes maximum capacity over individual space, privacy, or dignity. The facilities demonstrate impressive efficiency in human storage techniques that prepare people for transportation conditions that make warehouse storage seem luxurious by comparison. Communication happens in languages that won't be useful in destination countries where speaking African languages becomes prohibited and learning English, Spanish, or Portuguese becomes mandatory for people whose educational opportunities emphasize understanding commands rather than developing literacy or cultural knowledge. The auction process involves commercial evaluation that assesses human beings using criteria that include physical strength, health status, age, gender, and estimated productivity for agricultural work, creating market systems that would fascinate economists studying commodities trading if the commodities weren't people who understand what's happening to them. Local customs include traditional ceremonies, social practices, and cultural celebrations that maintain community identity and individual belonging, which will be permanently lost when individuals get relocated to places where traditional customs become impossible to practice and cultural continuity becomes impossible to maintain. The European merchants demonstrate impressive international business coordination in organizing supply chains that connect African suppliers with American customers through transportation systems that optimize profit margins rather than human survival rates, creating commercial networks that span continents and involve multiple currencies, legal systems, and cultural contexts. Your childhood involves traditional education, play, and cultural development that prepare you for adult roles in West African society, which become irrelevant when your adult role gets redefined as permanent agricultural labor in societies that consider your childhood cultural education evidence of primitive background that requires civilizing through forced cultural conversion. The weapons trade provides military equipment that enables capture operations, while creating economic incentives for continuous warfare between African groups, who discover that selling prisoners provides better income than traditional economic activities like farming, crafts, or trade in goods that don't involve human suffering. But the sun sets over another day in West Africa, where traditional life continues until it doesn't, and somewhere across the Atlantic Ocean, ships are waiting to demonstrate that the Middle Passage represents humanity's most successful combination of maritime technology with systematic dehumanization, creating transportation experiences that make West African slave raids seem like the pleasant part of a very unpleasant process. Part 23. The Middle Passage, Atlantic Ocean, 16th–19th centuries. The African coast disappears into Atlantic darkness, where the hold of a slave ship provides accommodations that would violate animal cruelty laws if animal cruelty laws existed, and if the passengers were considered animals rather than cargo that happens to breathe, occasionally. You wake up chained in the belly of a ship somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean, and the morning brings the realization that you're participating in humanity's most successful business model, based entirely on treating people like agricultural equipment that can be transported across oceans and sold in foreign markets, to provide labor for economic systems that depend on human misery for profitability. The ship's hold provides community living experiences that nobody requested, featuring accommodations that emphasize maximum capacity over human dignity, comfort, or survival rates. The transportation industry demonstrates impressive efficiency in moving human cargo from African markets to American markets, using shipping techniques that prioritize profit margins over passenger mortality statistics. Your daily routine involves lying in spaces designed for people who are significantly smaller than actual people, breathing air that contains oxygen mixed with human waste, fear, and the distinctive aroma of decomposition from passengers who've completed their journey ahead of schedule. The ventilation system operates with efficiency that would challenge marine engineers studying airflow in enclosed spaces designed to minimize rather than maximize human survival. The ship's design demonstrates innovative approaches to cargo storage that combine maritime engineering with creative interpretation of space requirements for merchandise that needs to remain alive during transportation, but doesn't require comfort, privacy, or basic human dignity. The architecture emphasizes density over habitability, creating accommodations that would impress efficiency experts studying maximum capacity utilization. Food distribution involves portions calculated to maintain biological function without providing adequate nutrition, creating meal plans that would challenge nutritionists studying minimum caloric requirements for preventing immediate death while maintaining maximum shipping profitability. The cuisine consists of whatever can be stored in bulk quantities and distributed efficiently to people who can't complain about menu selection. Medical care involves ship surgeons whose patient load includes people suffering from conditions that result from being chained in human waste while experiencing prolonged malnutrition and dehydration. The healthcare system provides treatment using medical knowledge that emphasizes maintaining cargo value rather than passenger comfort, creating therapeutic approaches that focus on preventing death without preventing suffering. The ocean voyage includes entertainment opportunities such as disease transmission, malnutrition competitions, and occasional rebellion attempts that provide excitement for passengers and crew members alike. The maritime experience emphasizes themes of despair, death, and the impressive human capacity for treating other humans worse than livestock, while maintaining religious beliefs about divine love and human dignity. Your fellow passengers include people from various African cultures who share the common experience of being converted from individuals to inventory through commercial processes that demonstrate impressive international cooperation in systematic dehumanization. The social dynamics involve creating community bonds among people who may not share languages but definitely share circumstances. The Middle Passage represents the geographic space between African freedom and American slavery, where freedom gets converted into bondage through transportation systems that would challenge engineers studying optimization problems that involve maximizing human suffering while minimizing transportation costs. The journey demonstrates humanity's remarkable ability to systematize evil while maintaining social institutions that celebrate human rights, individual dignity, and divine justice. Sleep happens in positions that would challenge professional contortionists under the best circumstances, which these definitely aren't, creating rest periods that provide practice for death while maintaining technical biological function. The accommodation standards emphasize efficient use of space over human comfort, privacy, or the basic dignity that animals receive in modern transportation systems. Weather conditions provide seasonal variations that include storms that make terrible conditions worse and calm seas that allow terrible conditions to continue without interruption. The Atlantic Ocean demonstrates consistent hostility to human survival when humans are stored in ship holds, designed by people who consider human survival a secondary consideration to cargo capacity. The survival statistics would impress actuaries studying mortality rates in extreme conditions, assuming actuaries existed and worked for insurance companies that provided coverage for human cargo shipments. The death rates create natural selection pressures that favor passengers who can survive conditions designed to challenge human survival limits, while maintaining consciousness long enough to be profitable upon arrival. Communication happens in multiple African languages that won't be useful in destination countries, but provide temporary comfort, people sharing experiences that transcend language barriers. The linguistic diversity creates opportunities for cultural exchange among people whose cultural knowledge will be systematically eliminated during plantation orientation programs. The ship's crew demonstrates professional competence in human cargo management, using techniques that combine maritime skills with systematic dehumanization training. The sailors provide services that include feeding, cleaning, and maintaining human merchandise using methods that emphasize efficiency over humanitarian considerations. Religious services provide spiritual guidance that attempts to reconcile divine love with systematic enslavement, creating theological challenges that involve explaining why God permits slavery while encouraging acceptance of suffering as divine will. The chaplains offer salvation through submission while participating in transportation systems that would challenge traditional concepts of Christian charity. The rebellion attempts demonstrate impressive coordination among people who don't share languages, but share determination to escape conditions that make death seem preferable to continued transportation. The resistance activities provide opportunities for collective action that usually result in collective punishment, creating group dynamics that emphasize solidarity in suffering. Your chains provide security systems that ensure passenger compliance with transportation arrangements they didn't agree to for journeys they don't want to complete to destinations they've never chosen. The restraint technology demonstrates impressive metallurgy applied to problems of human cargo management during extended ocean voyages. The economic calculations involve determining optimal cargo density that maximizes profit per voyage, while accepting mortality rates that would concern modern transportation safety inspectors. If modern transportation safety inspectors had authority over shipping operations that treat humans as merchandise rather than passengers. The dawn breaks over another day in the Atlantic Ocean, where the sunrise reflects off water that carries people from lives they chose toward lives they didn't choose. And this marks the end of our tour through 25 examples of humanity's remarkable creativity in generating suffering. The Middle Passage concludes our journey through geographic locations and historical periods where being born meant participating in systematic human misery, designed by people who confused power with wisdom, efficiency with morality, and profits with progress. The coordinates change, the technology evolves, the justifications get updated, but the fundamental equation remains remarkably consistent. Human creativity plus organizational efficiency plus political power equals other people's suffering, calculated with mathematical precision and implemented with bureaucratic thoroughness. Your survival of this historical tour suggests either impressive fortitude or dangerous curiosity about subjects that most people prefer to delegate to textbooks that emphasize dates and names, rather than the smell of decomposition and the sound of people discovering that their neighbors have decided they need to stop existing. The lesson, if there is one, might be that being born is essentially a geographic and temporal lottery, where the vast majority of tickets are losing tickets, and the winning tickets are distributed by people who keep most of the winning tickets for themselves. Welcome to human history, where your birth certificate doubles as a lottery ticket in the grand game of systematic suffering, and the house always wins because the house is operated by people who've discovered that other people's misery can be surprisingly profitable when organized efficiently and justified creatively. Class dismissed. Try not to think about it too much.